Tell you on that one, right of way is scheduled for FY23 and then construction in FY24.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Councilmember Perrin?
Scott, on the roundabout at 62nd and Rimrock, it was my understanding that they moved it up from 2024 to 2023. And I think on there you just have, oh, where is it? I just lost it again. There it is, the updated cost.
Right, and
But did they update the timeline?
yeah, that's true. It has been moved up.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Go ahead, then, Scott.
As far as the review process, our technical advisory committee looked at this on the October 14th and has recommended the updates that you see in the document. We went to the commissioners' discussion this morning. We'll go officially tomorrow morning and we'll get recommendation from them. But basically, this will be on your meeting agenda for Monday, the 25th. For recommendation to PCC. And I'll stand for any more questions anybody has.
Okay, anything else for Scott? Councilmember Neese.
Thank you. Scott, the council has talked quite a bit about the underpass over at 21st Street, I believe it is. Is that in this, is that going to be able to be added into this?
It's not added in yet. It's not in this document because there's no money flowing to it, no federal money flowing to it. Although I can tell you, internally, there's been a lot of discussion about that. And what we're doing as we move forward with kind of this document and our transportation planning process, we're going to be looking at that project as a project that we might want to prioritize for the next round of federal funding. As you can imagine, there's going to be probably 3 or 4, maybe 5 projects that we'll get to kind of put in that system, but you guys will get a look at that.
Great, thank you.
You bet.
Thank you very much. Anything else for Scott? Don't see anything. We'll open up for public comment then.
Okay.
Don't go away.
Thank you.
This is an opportunity this evening for public comment on item number 1, the draft 2020-24 TIP or Transportation Improvement Program. If you'd like to comment, please come forward to the podium right now and keep your comments to 3 minutes and tell us your name and address up front. Is there anybody who would like to comment on item number 1? Any public comment on item number 1? Don't see any, so we'll close the public comment period for number 1. Each of our 5 items tonight does have public comment after each item, so you'll have an opportunity on later items as well. And there should be a copy of the agenda if anybody doesn't have one and is curious, back on that cart back there. Our second item up then is our solid waste operations update. Our Public Works Director, Debbie Melling, is getting set up, and we'll turn it over to Debbie.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Purinton.
While we're waiting, I have a note to myself, but I just wanted to thank Debbie and Mac. They did a really great job of addressing one of the citizens concerned right at Virginia Lane and Rimrock Road, and having to deal with post office. And that's when Debbie was out, but Mac actually went by the guy's house a couple of times, and I don't know, he probably invited him in for coffee. I don't know, but it just, I just want to let you know that we really appreciate your customer service, I think. And the gentleman was very pleased and thought it was great. So thank you.
Thank you for mentioning that.
Okay.
Debbie.
Solid waste update for today. The one thing I want to do before I start is introduce our new solid waste superintendent. I don't think he knows I'm going to do this, but he's back there kind of behind the, there we go. He came to us from Arkansas and Texas and North Carolina. I don't know if I got all those right, but joined us about 6 months ago, and he's taken things on that are hard and done them already. So we're excited to have Kyle here. Okay. So I'm here because there's been a lot of conversation about solid waste lately. And in one of the emails, Councilmember Purinton asked if we would come and do an update, and that seemed to have some traction. So we're going to update. Well, don't. Okay, I'm not sure why this isn't working. Okay, so, do you want to look at it? Sure. So I just wanted to start here and show some of the things that we've seen from solid waste here for the last 10 years. Back in FY11, which is the last time that we had a new employee, we had about 31,000, just over 31,000 customers. We now have, in the residential collection, we now have over 43,000, and we have not added a full-time employee until this next fiscal year. So in order to do that, we've done a few different things. And we'll continue to keep doing these, but one thing you can always do is, of course, raise rates, which we never want to do. We hear from people all the time, keep the rates low. It's a good value, we want to see this. So everything else that we look at looks at efficiency and then changing the flow of waste. Those are really the only options you have when you're looking at solid waste. So, go to the next one. So one of the things that we committed to with the City Council was to develop a pay-as-you-throw concept and move that direction. And so a few things we have to do to get ready for a pay-as-you-throw system, some of which we would have done anyway and some that we need to do to get to that option. First, we have to physically get ready for it. Right now, there's a lot of shared containers in alleys. The 300-gallon containers that are in the alleys need to be converted to 90s. And we have about 16,000 remaining to convert. And then we've told you for a couple of years we've been going to do that. That has been a supply issue and a manpower issue. It takes a lot of additional people, and you'll see later on that we don't have additional people to roll that out. So on October 25th, there's a bid award coming forward, and it is not only the containers, the 16,000 containers, but it's also the delivery. So the contractor will actually deliver them to the site for us. The second thing we have to do is convert some of the alley to curbside, and I wrote hiccup in the heights here. And I know Councilmember Ewalt knows what I'm talking about. We had some miscommunication and we moved the heights to the curbside. A lot of those, the majority of those will be moving back to alleys. So you'll be seeing that probably in November or early December when those start moving back. And then the second thing we need to do is do a cost of services, figure out what it costs us to do each one of these activities. We will be focusing on residential. The commercial really already pays for themselves. If you have, 3-yard container, 4-yard, 9-yard, whatever you have, that's what you're paying for. So commercial kind of already does it, but residential really doesn't. Okay. So just a quick review on residential. If you live in a home in Billings and have service from the city, your first container, the black container, is $11.82 a month. If you want to add a second one, it's $3.96. So that's 98 cents a week to have a second container. That probably is going to change when we do the pay-as-you-throw, but for now, that's what the numbers are. The other thing we do is we provide walkout service, and at 2 times the monthly fee, you can get walkout service. That's intended for people that cannot walk their containers out. We do have a lot more people on that than we probably should have, and we'll talk about that on a future slide here. We also do Green Barrel. There's no additional cost for Green Barrel. About 60% of our customers use that service, which is just under 20,000. And we provide that service April through November, obviously when most people need yard waste. Our extras are provided at no extra cost. If you put extras on the ground next to your residential container, it'll get picked up. Now it'll get picked up monthly, used to get picked up weekly, but there is no charge for that. So these are all good programs, but not tying them to service means 2 things. One, you're not basing it on service, so people that use less service are paying, they're basically subsidizing people that are using more service. The other thing is we really don't have any incentive for people to be more efficient. So if you look at our waste stream, you'll see a lot of boxes that aren't broken down. You'll see things just, and you should pay attention to the pictures. These are great pictures in this presentation. You'll see where people could have probably put more in their black barrel and they just laid it beside it, or it's strung out on the street. So there's really no incentive right now for our customers to be efficient. And that's one thing that we want to provide is that, if you're efficient, you pay less, which is good for a lot of people. So our carryout service currently has about 200 users. It is not restricted. We don't ask any questions. If you pay twice as much as everybody else does, you get us to carry that container out for you. As you can imagine, that's a very inefficient operation. It takes a lot of staff time. So I believe it's been talked about here before, and really we have 2 options. A lot of communities do no cost for that service, but you have to get a doctor's note saying, I can't physically take my container out to the curb. So that's one option. The other option is, of course, continuing to charge for it. And I guess the question would be, do we still ask for, a need and a necessity, or do we just open it up to people? I can tell you with the staffing we have right now, we can't take on a lot more of this. But that's one of the options we'll have to talk about. Okay, so the extras, which is what we're here tonight basically to talk about. So our curbside service, about 15 to 20% of our curbside customers use this service. A lot of people had no idea what we were talking about. We got calls from people, what do you mean extras? What do you mean I can put my extras out? So we might have opened a can of worms there, but a lot of people don't use this service. But of the ones that do, we're getting more and more, and it's becoming a standard service. It's not a one-time, it's not the occasional, Christmas when you got all that stuff in your house. It's every single week, there's more and more and more showing up on the curb. So because that service is just going up for several of our customers, we started looking at that, and a couple things jumped out. One is our alley customers have no extra pickup. They put it in the alley, and if the alleys get really bad, we send a truck out to clean them up. But there's not a weekly, monthly, any kind of service for our alley customers. The other thing is, like I said before, our small waste consumers, if you have one bag in a black container, you are subsidizing how much time it takes for us to take the black, the green, and all the extras. So if you can imagine picking up the pile of rubble there that's in that picture on the bottom is not very safe for our drivers to get out. There's nails, there's all sorts of things buried in there, glass, just things that are not very safe. When we can pick it up with a container, like in that first picture, when we can pick it up with a truck and it's all manual, that's a lot safer and more efficient for our drivers. So the other thing, and I mentioned this earlier, it really doesn't encourage our customers to reduce. So it doesn't encourage people to break down boxes or be more efficient in their use. The other thing is the labor shortage, and this one I did a whole slide on it. We have 42 driver positions. That includes commercial and residential. We're 6 short right now. That's 14% of our staff. We're short. So when you look at our opportunity to do something different with the shorter staff, we really can't reduce our residential. We really can't reduce our yard waste. And if you look at that, there's 10 drivers for residential. There's 5 drivers for yard waste for the entire city. And then there's 8 drivers that take care of the extras and the walkouts. So again, I'm just coming back to that efficiency piece. And we really, with the lack of drivers that we have right now, the extras was the only thing we really could look at doing. So we changed from weekly to monthly service, and that allows us to use those resources that we have to meet the primary needs of most of our customers. Gives us flexibility, like I said, and one thing that a lot of people have been concerned about is that we wouldn't continue or finish that Monday curbside pickup. We are within an hour or two of finishing most weeks, so we're gonna go ahead and do overtime on those weeks and get everything picked up on Mondays. I think that'll take care of a lot of the concerns that we've been hearing from people. Second black barrel, again, is 98 cents a week. If you have extras every week, week after week, we're happy to get another container for people. 98 cents a week is still a steal, so. We did modify our landfill operations slightly. If on the off chance that a lot of people inundated our landfill after we moved to this, we did create a process by which we could temporarily bring some of the people with 1 or 2 bags in without taking them over the scale. We haven't had to do that, but we have it in place in case we start seeing that. The other thing is education and continued communication. We are putting door hangers out on every property that is still putting their extras out on the wrong day. We're putting door hangers out for them with the information on it. So as far as the landfill goes, we did have a question about whether we would open on Sundays. I just wanted to show this, this slide that really shows the difference between our weekdays and our weekends. You can see the area under the graph at the top was before we changed to monthly, and the area afterwards is after we changed to monthly. It doesn't look like we've had an increase in total volume. In addition, if you look at the bottom, our Saturdays are so incredibly low. We have less than 300 customers, less than 200 tons of material coming in. So if we were to open on a Sunday, I would anticipate that number going down and our Sunday numbers being pretty low as well. So benefits of everything we've talked about tonight. Obviously the equity piece, you pay for what you use. If you don't use it, you don't pay for it. You have the ability to keep your rates low by being more efficient and making sure that you're you're using the services we provide as efficiently as possible. Provides us flexibility. As I said, expanded services there. We've been able to grow 13,000 customers without adding additional FTEs. That's through efficiencies we found through routes, efficiencies we've found through our process, and just different ways we've been able to address that. We'll be able to do alley extras, possibly doing more bulky item pickup, which we see in a lot of alleys around town. If you drive around, you'll see mattresses, chairs, TVs, all sorts of things. We'll be able to actually pick some of those up on a more frequent basis. And then composting, at some point, we obviously are moving toward composting, and we want to make sure that we have the staff available to provide that service as well. So again, it creates buy-in with our customers, being part of the solution here, and helps us keep those rates low. So what are we doing? We're going to finish the alley to curb to conversion and curb to alley conversion in the Heights. We're going to finish the 300 to 90 conversion. We have a new program that we can optimize our routes. We bought Routeware several years ago, and there's a program in there that allows us to really optimize what we're doing. So we're running that right now. We will finalize the carryout recommendation, and that is a council decision as to whether, kind of how we want to go with that process. It'll be part of the rates. We'll develop those pay-as-you-throw options and bring it back with rate structures and the rates for you. And I put communicate on here because that's obviously a big part of any of these changes. So with the extras change, we did social media. We did Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, all of those. We did the Gazette, KTVQ, Color 8, sent emails that were to mayor and council, hoping that more people would read that online. We did door hangers, and then we emailed every customer we have in our database. So that's what we did with the extras. The one thing that I'm trying to move to is, a lot of you are familiar with phone systems. You know, the school will call you and say, this is happening or something. We're looking at that kind of system. We think we have the ability with some work to do, but if we could do that, we could actually call each location and say, tomorrow's your extra day, you know, or however we want to communicate. It would be very efficient, and we have phone numbers for almost every customer we have. I put billing inserts and direct mailing, but they're about $20,000 a piece, and so it's not a lot of bang for our buck. A lot of people throw those away, and so I'm a little reticent to go that direction, but I'm all ears if you have other ways we can communicate with people. And Chris's went to the next slide, so I'm done apparently. Okay, no, I'm done. So.
All right, thank you very much. Great presentation, a lot of meat there, so we'll start chewing. Councilmember Bewald.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks, Debbie. That was a great presentation. If you can go back to the slide, you got to hand that back to Chris so we can go all the way back to the prices or the manpower on the trucks.
This one or the manpower?
The manpower one. Okay, right there. That 4 routes and 2 drivers per route.
She just wanted me over there to.
I did. I want to see if you'd do it.
Is that now since we changed the pickup, or was that before the change?
This is now, and it was before the change. The big difference was with the extras and the walkouts, we couldn't get to everything every week. And so we are still assigning 4 routes and 2 drivers per route for the extras and the pickups, but we're doing the alleys and the curbsides with that.
Okay. And a follow-up, please.
Sure.
However, sorry, can I?
Go ahead.
If we don't have enough people, which you can see we have these vacancies, that's where we don't provide that service.
Okay, so when I've been walking around, I've had people trying to figure out when they're supposed to get picked up. And I think like us, the loose garbage, I don't have any. I go to the landfill. I want to see what's going on out there anyway. But we get picked up on Thursday, but I think Monday's a loose garbage pickup. Is there any way that loose garbage could coincide with the same day that the regular garbage pickup, or it would make it less confusing maybe?
Right.
I don't know. I mean, this is something brand new, and so that was just a suggestion.
Right. And Councilmember Neese suggested the same thing. So, you know, when we did that, it was kind of to give us flexibility, see what you get done on Monday, and then you can move forward the rest of the week. I would say, given how close we've gotten to pick up every week, it would not be a problem to do it different days. I'm looking at Kyle and seeing if he's giving me the stink eye back there, but, you know, we could do that. I don't know if we want to make that change right after we did it in the first place, I think we need to get a good way to communicate to every customer before we do a change again. We've answered a lot of phone calls, and so I think a lot of people are starting to get that. Kyle can maybe give us a little bit of information on how it's looking, if people are starting to get it or if we're still having problems.
Okay, thank you, Debbie.
Is that all right if Kyle lets us know the update?
Yeah, absolutely. And while Kyle's coming forward, in case he can address Councilmember Deese's question as well.
That's what I was going to ask, because Debbie mentioned that Kyle is really the one who kind of suggested it this way, and I'd like to hear from him, why a different day versus the same day, and I hope he can explain some of that, so thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. It's a great recommendation. But like Debbie said, the flexibility that the Monday provides us is really the way we need to go, because we do so much more than just residential that we need to use some of these residential employees for. Commercial, roll-off. What you don't see on here is cart maintenance and delivery. We have like 400 or 500 outstanding work orders for that if we don't have staff to run these routes, those operators get pulled to go on routes. So there's so much other things that go into making the daily operational decisions than just these 3 items right here. So Monday, if I have I'm a Wednesday, so if my stuff goes out on a Wednesday, we've got 3 days to pick it up. And depending on staffing, depending on trucks, depending on a whole bunch of variables that could potentially put us in a bind.
Okay, thank you. Predictability, I think, is the main thing, so that people know. Councilmember Ronning and Councilmember Purinton?
Debbie, this is for you. And Kyle, welcome to Billings.
Thank you.
And yes, you do have a Southern accent. Was fully expecting that. So, yep. Sound a little bit like Casey Williams up there. So, Debbie, I think it was maybe Saturday or Sunday that I saw in a newspaper that Missoula charges, first of all, they have, Republic does their pickup, and they charge their customers $360 a year. So kudos to the Billings City Solid Waste Department in being able to do all that you do in the largest city of Montana for the price that you do it for. I still want to do my ride-along, and just want to make sure their council members know that they can do a ride-along with solid waste driver as well, and encourage them to do that, and any candidate, encourage them to do that. So it just is amazing to me how and I mean, you guys are really working clearly unbelievably hard. How is that possible? Is Missoula just making a really big profit and we're not? Or how are you all managing to do this for such a low price, such a great value?
I'm looking at Kyle, but I will say that our routes are huge. A residential route is over 1,000 pickups typically, and in most communities, it's not that big. So we're able to really maximize what we're doing with each route, and we're hoping to get even better on that. There is a limit to how much we can do, but we're lucky we have landfill as well, so there's not so much time back and forth to the landfill, and so we are lucky in the respect that we actually have that. And I'm going to hopefully quote Jennifer right here, but I believe our landfill does subsidize some of our pickup.
It does.
So thank you. I knew she'd said that, but I was making sure I didn't say it backwards. So having both facility, the facility and the collection does help us. When we get to a pay-as-you-throw system, if we get to that point, we will show you what those cost of services are, and we can decide how we want to do that.
Okay. I just truly compliment you. This truly is one of the best deals that residents in the city of Billings has. This is an extraordinary value. So thank you.
We have great staff in that
Absolutely.
division.
Thank you.
And bring your gloves and your boots. We've got a couple alleys that need picked up. So.
Yeah.
Right along, I don't think so.
And if one of those 300-gallon ones fall in, you can get out there and flip it back out, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Councilmember Purinton?
Thank you. So could you explain a little bit about the hiccup in the Heights? I'm not aware of it. And also, how would this fit into this pay-as-you-go?
Okay, I will start with the Heights question.
Okay.
There was miscommunication along the way. When we did the conversion from alleys to curbside, it was just going to be the alleys that were dead end or narrow and couldn't have containers in there, or some kind of safety issue. In the Heights, what happened is all of the alley got put on the curbside. So we need to move most of those back. So that's what happened there. You look like you want to add something.
Yeah, I just would repeat that same thing to make the point. So if you do a ride-along and watch these guys back up an alley or a street because it doesn't go through, you'll see just how dangerous it is. So the intent was not to stop providing alley pickup for through alleys. And to me, it's important that this isn't about the Heights. This is about all alleys that connect through, get the same service, and all alleys that don't connect through and that are dangerous, we can't pick it up efficiently in an alley.
So just to follow up, so you're saying that with those alley pickups, though, you would go to the 90-gallon container. So it's still going to be an individual residence that you're picking up trash for?
Exactly.
Oh, okay.
Yep, that's key to it. If everybody has a 300, we can't charge individually.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Okay, thank you.
Sure.
These customers that we're putting back in the alleys, they already have 90 gallon. So it's simply just taking it from the curb and putting it back in the alley.
Perfect, thank you.
Debbie, if you could address the issue of recycling. I'm one of those people who never put anything out extra and always looked askance if somebody did. I wasn't quite sure how that was possible. I have a trash compactor, and we pay Earth First Aid $24 a month to come pick up our recycling. And some of my neighbors, when I see large loads out there, they're almost all cardboard, large, giant cardboard boxes. And I think, oh, well, that's what Earth First Aid's for. So I pay for that.
Right.
A lot more, frankly, than what it would cost just to have a second bin. But I'm happy to do that, and it keeps it out of the waste stream to some extent. We get that question all the time. Why doesn't Billings have a recycling program or a better recycling program? Lots of issues there, but can you just address that? Because that's something that comes up all the time.
Sure. Sure, Mayor and Council, recycling is expensive. I mean, as you can imagine, it's another truck that goes to every residence. And then right now, there's not a huge demand for recycled goods. So not only do you pick them up, you take them to the landfill, separate them, and then you have to ship them off to somebody that'll buy them from you. Kyle and I were talking a little bit earlier, cardboard's really the only thing that's making any money right now. Everything else, I think you said paper was $0. So you're not gonna get anything back from that recycling. So it is pretty much a full, straight out cost of service. Now, that being said, when we go to cost of service, if we get to a point where what you use is what you pay for, someone may choose to have a recycling bin because it's cheaper than having 2 black containers. And I think that's an important conversation we need to have. We'll figure out what those numbers are, and we'll bring that back when we bring back the rest of the rates and the rate structure.
Okay, thank you very much. We certainly have no problem with encouraging people to use private pickups like Earth First Aid, I'm assuming, right?
That's great.
Okay, I have no stock in it, but their number is 698-0903, 698-0903. Okay, Councilmember Neese.
Thank you, Mayor. Hey, Debbie, since you said you're short 6 drivers, maybe you'll let the public know, what qualifications and what they pay. And then also, you mentioned about modifying the landfill policy. I'm not sure what you modified and
Sure.
when is that going back if you're going to unmodify it at a certain time?
Sure.
Thanks.
Okay, so as far as what we pay, do you remember?
I think starting this, I think now it's over $18 with the recent pay adjustment starting out.
Right. And then it goes up approximately 35% from there. So it's decent pay. We need CDLs, so you have to have that commercial driver's license. But obviously full benefits working with the city. So if you're looking for a job, come see us. As far as what we did at the landfill, all we did was get ready in case we had an influx of people coming in. And so what can happen at the scale is it can kind of back up if we have a lot of vehicles. So we created a side road, and if we had somebody with 1 or 2 bags where we could easily tell what the weight was, we could have them bypass the scale. Hasn't happened yet. We've not had that necessary, so we won't
Thank you.
switch that.
Councilor Rewalt?
Thank you, Mayor. Debbie, what's the cost of those 90-gallon barrels?
They are about $58 a piece, I think, is the bid that you'll see next week.
So in a year's time, we don't even get enough back to pay for that barrel.
So we do
Second
charge
barrel.
about $12 a month, so,
For the
So
second
the second barrel.
Oh, the second barrel.
is under
No,
$4.
no, it's not
so
enough to
you
get the
don't
second
even
barrel.
pay for the barrel, so
right.
$5 seems like it would be a little bit more appropriate. At least we'd get the barrel paid for in the first year, and that would, because if these garbage trucks on their route are picking up a lot of those extra barrels, they're gonna have to shut down on the route and head back to the landfill sooner. But I agree with you, it is so nice having that landfill so close to the city. Great Falls, you drive forever before you get to the landfill when you leave the city limits. So that's a real nice thing for us. But did you get a whole shipment of the black barrels finally back in?
We did.
Oh, good.
We did, thank
'Cause
goodness,
I've been
yes.
seeing some of the new pink barrels out of a few places, other than the one, the duplex that we talked about, so.
Yeah.
But they worked, the people were just happy as can be, because they had a garbage can anyway, they didn't care if it was pink, so.
Yep, and if I may, it's a balance. We don't want extras. You saw in the picture, it is so hard for our drivers to get out of the truck, pick it up. It's not safe. We want people to have that second black barrel. And so it's kind of a balance of making sure that it's a good enough value that they don't just put extras out there. And I think that's all part of the new rate structure that we'll bring in.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Final questions before we go to public comment. Councilmember Purington?
So I thought it was, you had to have 4 feet in length and it had to be bundled. Did that go away or is that still the case?
It did not go away. It is still the case.
So some of those that had 2x4s or
Yeah.
whatever those were, do you leave a little note saying, we're not picking this up until you break it down, or you take it to the landfill yourself?
Yes, that particular one I showed had a lot of conversations included with it.
That's so, well, just one other little thing. I just want you to know, I really don't like the black barrels because you have to open it up this way. And being short, it's like, it's hard for me to open those, and you have to push it this way. I have to push it. So anyway, I just don't really like those black barrels. I wish we had a different structure on those, but that's just my 2 cents. Sorry, hey, we were working this weekend, but I was using that barrel.
Councilmember Purington, or Councilmember Running, I'm sorry.
Thank you. I have a pink barrel, and I'm not giving it up.
If you can keep
I
it forever.
love that pink barrel, so, yeah. And it works just like all the other barrels, so, yeah, love it, not giving it up.
Good. Thank you.
Okay, let's open up for public comment then. This is item number 2, the solid waste update that you heard. If you'd like to comment, please come forward. Ask that you keep your comments to 3 minutes and tell us your name and address up front. Would anybody like to comment on item number 2? Anybody like to comment? Item number 2. Nobody's coming forward, so we'll close the public comment period. Thank you very much, and move on to item number 3. Or sure, before we do, Councilmember Ewald.
I just want to let people know that since they put the big building up at the landfill where you drive inside the building and push your garbage off, it's not like you go out to the landfill and before you get to the bottom of the hill, you got a flat tire. So it's way better than it used to be. Plus, you don't have garbage blowing around you while you're out there dumping it. So if you got a pickup or something like it, it's no big deal. Run out there and you just drive into the building, push the garbage off, and they push it down the hole, and you can go on safely, and you hardly ever leave the blacktop street, so.
Yep, that's great. Chris?
Mayor, if I could add one last word here as Karen's getting set. Part of the benefit of pay as you throw is actually getting to a point where some customers don't actually need a 90-gallon, and they would pay less. So not only are they subsidizing those who use a lot, you actually can get to a scenario where you help those who produce very little. And I think we all could relate to the fact that it would be unimaginable to say, let's pull all the water meters out and everybody should just pay a flat rate for water. But that's kind of what we do. It is exactly what we do. It's not kind of. It's exactly what we do when we have a one-size-fits-all, charge for the garbage we produce. So I think there are a lot of benefits as we work our way through this for equity and people paying for what they use versus subsidizing their neighbors for what they use. So thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Important point. Item number 3, marijuana regulations update. Karen Tracy, our Assistant City Attorney, is our presenter this evening. Karen?
Good evening. I'm not quite sure why I can't get just one slide per screen. Ah, there you go. I tell you, every now and then a blind squirrel finds an acorn. Today is the 5-month anniversary of House Bill 701. Happy anniversary to us. We've done a lot in the last 5 months. You'll see this is our 6th work session. Many of us have participated in a couple of meetings with Ben Court that were hosted by Substance Abuse Connect. We met with the community at the library on the 13th, which was extremely interesting and helpful. And so we have done a lot. Y'all are probably probably the best educated and informed body politic on this topic in the state. And even if you have philosophical differences, you certainly have an excellent grasp of the issues. I heard Councilmember Purinton at the commissioners meeting talking to the commissioners, and she had a wonderful grasp of the issues and was able to convey those. So you should feel good about the education that you've given yourself on this. We discussed early on about the reason that we wanted to regulate this, and you'll find this section in the proposed ordinance. I just wanted to touch on it. The reason that we're regulating the sale, possession, and use of marijuana is that it may be harmful, if not carefully regulated. And that we are doing this to permit marijuana to be cultivated, manufactured, tested, distributed, sold, and used in accordance with state law. Early on, the direction from this council was that we wanted to regulate and not prohibit. The voters still have the option of deciding against retail dispensaries, and if they do that, then the voters will prevail in that. But otherwise, we are regulating and not prohibiting. We are down to 3 issues. We are down to the dispensary cap issue, we're down to the canopy cap issue, and we are looking at potency. In the proposed ordinance, the first reading of which is next week, this is the cap. It's the state cap. And we've had 2 weeks to survey to see if we could tell you what THC level might be safe for the human body. At what point does something do other things to the human body? And I cannot stand here tonight and give you a rational basis and say, here's the line of capping potency. This is where it's safe to cap it. Now, given that we've only had 2 weeks, that's one thing. But if you gave me 2 years, I suspect that we would be at the exact same place. There's so many variables that deal with potency. We can talk about the flower, which is the only one that is capped at 35%. We heard from the community last week that basically it would be difficult because marijuana has been genetically engineered to reach a certain THC to back up and reverse that cap and cap it at, say, 20%. So that would be difficult. Plus, it could easily be circumvented by purchasing out of city limits and within the county. One of the issues, if you go down to number 4 with the edibles, there is a certain amount that you can buy in a package for edibles, and that's no more than 100 milligrams, 10 milligrams, say, per gummy. And so you could have 10 of those in a pack. The legislature has said, we're going to let you buy 100 milligrams of this product at a time. This is how they have chosen to cap both the quantity and the strength. These are all of the categories that they've given us. I do want to mention that looking at a straight percentage of THC in marijuana flower and saying that 35% is too much, but 20% might be fine, is that you don't know the relationship between the THC and the CBD. They kind of balance, like oil and vinegar in a dressing. And so if you had enough CBD in marijuana, from what I understand about it, that would not be nearly as harmful as perhaps a lower THC level that did not have the corresponding CBD level. The other thing that you have to look at is the amount of THC that goes into a body when somebody smokes marijuana can be greatly affected by the method in which they smoke their marijuana, how it happens to affect their body. It can make a difference with that. So you've got that variable. Down on number 7 is where you get into your wax and your dabs. And arguably those are the methods that would get the THC into somebody's system the quickest and the fastest. But then again, that also has a variable. How you smoke that and how it vaporizes, and if you lose any of the THC in that process, and then how much of it actually gets into your body. So I cannot stand here and give you a rational basis for capping the potency other than to adopt the state regulations. And I'm sure we'll circle back to that with some questions. The remainder of this might be a little bit like deja vu to you, a rerun. We talked about dispensary caps, and we also talked about the fact that marijuana will not be sold in the red jurisdictions. It can be sold in the green jurisdictions. We talked about the region around us that will not have marijuana available to it would be a population of about 227,135. You may recall that we discussed the fact that there is an impact to our community for having dispensaries in terms of location and in terms of number, and that this council will have to determine when providing for a dispensary number, whether or not our community is going to have dispensaries to serve the Dakotas and Wyoming, given that possession and sale of marijuana other than medical marijuana is illegal in these states. In other words, if somebody is buying recreational marijuana in Yellowstone County and they're putting it in their car and they're driving back to the Dakotas, that is illegal. They will drive back to the Dakotas with their purchases from Costco and with their purchases from the dispensary, and they will leave that dispensary behind for our residents to bear the socioeconomic burden of having those dispensaries in our jurisdiction. So that was one thing that we discussed at length when we talked about caps. This right here is probably the most important slide that we've had in all of our 6 work sessions. There were 2 distance levels that we studied, and one was there is an increased use of cannabis if you're within 18.4 miles of a dispensary. Probably any 2 places, 2 points in Billings are within 18.4 miles of each other. So if there's one dispensary in Billings, probably everybody who lives in Billings is going to live within 18.4 miles of that dispensary. So we know that there will be some effect with having dispensaries in our community. However, the really difficult marker is this 0.8 miles of a retailer, because cannabis use significantly increases if you live within 0.8 miles of a retailer. Our zoning folks have worked diligently to identify as many areas as would be suitable, or at least the least harmful, to place dispensaries. And that zoning piece will be something that this council will have to we'll have to address. We talked about dispensary saturation. You've seen this chart before. Yellowstone County right now, we're aware of 29 dispensaries within the county, 2 of those within the city. We have, at that rate, 1 dispensary for every 5,650 people in the county, which is, if they all started selling retail marijuana come January 1st, would be about the saturation of Oregon. Which, please check out the Billings Gazette article today about the situation in Oregon regarding cultivation and the National Guard being called in. Washington State has 1 dispensary for every 13,000. Approximately, Pueblo has 1 dispensary for every 14,000. And we talked about how we probably want to be in the middle of that pack, not on one extreme or the other extreme, but somewhere reasonably in the middle of the pack. On the dispensary targets, we looked at this at an earlier work session. And if we had the same saturation as Pueblo or Washington State, we would have 8 dispensaries within city limits. You will see next week when we have the first reading, the staff's recommendation is going to be 12 retail dispensaries within city limits and 12 medical dispensaries within city limits. That gives us a little bit more than Pueblo and Washington State, but less than we would have in Oregon. That is going to be the staff recommendation. We could have enough to geographically have them in different parts of the city without having an overwhelming number of dispensaries. It's my understanding that there are 10 liquor stores in the city of Billings. I could be off on that, but this would give us about a comparable number of retail dispensaries. We also discussed the potential of capping canopies. And this has to do with how much marijuana can be grown in an indoor space in terms of square footage. You will see next week that the staff's recommendation is going to be to cap it at tier 7. There is a potential issue, and we've given you the research citations on this. There is an issue with indoor air quality for people who work in these indoor cultivation facilities. We really do need to see if we're going to have an impact on workers and that indoor air quality. We need to see if we're going to have a sufficient manner of regulating emissions from these indoor cultivation facilities. My recommendation and staff's recommendation is going to be to cap that at tier 7 until we determine whether or not we have other issues regarding worker safety and emissions that need to be addressed. The issue that they're having in Oregon is that some of these industrial size cultivations have gotten out of hand and have gone into the black market and the cartels, to the point where there are cultivation sites that have sprung up all over their state, and they're having problems getting their hands around it because these are people who are armed, and these are people who are using migrant workers, is just basically another method of human slavery. And you end up with a huge agricultural grow. So the recommendation is going to be for now to cap this at tier 7. When we drafted the ordinance, our goals were to protect the public safety, welfare, and health. And what we wanted to do, and the reason that we have a comprehensive licensing scheme and that you have such a fat little packet of a potential ordinance, is that we want to allow for timely and responsive enforcement of the marijuana business violations. Otherwise, we are at the mercy of the state, who is juggling a lot at the moment to respond to business violations. We do not want to be in a situation where we cannot respond and abate a nuisance. We also want to minimize the impact to residents consistent with available research about zoning and dispensary concentrations. Those are your caps and your zones that we're going to permit dispensaries. We also looked at protecting worker safety and environmental concerns by implementing a canopy cap. The other thing that we sought to do was to minimize the additional burdens on the marijuana business owners. In that ordinance draft that you have, the first reading of which is next week, we tracked state law and the draft agency regulations regarding the qualification and licensing of marijuana business owners. We tracked the regs that are for labeling, that are for how to set up your manufacturing operation. We basically took everything that a business owner is going to need to do to comply with state law, and we brought a lot of that, or most of that, into our ordinance so that we could also monitor, regulate, and abate a violation quickly. So the goal was, don't make additional burdens beyond what the state is doing unless there is a favorable cost-benefit ratio. So even though the ordinance is long, it should not be much more onerous than what the state law and the DOR regulations currently are. On the implementing additional public safeguards, those are primarily posting of signs within the inside of a dispensary, signs that give you common sense warnings such as it's still illegal to drive impaired by marijuana. If you have a complaint about this dispensary, call this number in the city of Billings. By the way, this is not tested for safety. These products are not tested for safety. And possessing marijuana is still a violation of federal law. So these are simply very simple signs to post inside of dispensary with additional warnings, not unlike the warnings that we see on packs of cigarettes. And we tried to draft the ordinance so that it's more flexible for future amendments and the setting of fees by this council. I wanted to let you know where we borrowed. I'm not above plagiarizing if the work is good. We did look at the proposed rules from the Montana Department of Revenue regarding packaging, safety of packaging, child-proofing of packaging, content labeling of the packaging, and there are specific requirements by category of marijuana businesses. They have regulations for cultivation operations, for testing facilities, for manufacturing facilities. So we borrowed those regulations that are under consideration from the Montana Department of Revenue. From the spa ordinance, we adopted appeal provisions for applicants and license holders. So if you do not get a lottery ticket and you believe you are aggrieved by that process, there is an appeal process similar to the spa ordinance. If you do not get your license renewed, there is an appeal process similar to the spa ordinance. If we shut down your business because there is an urgent public health or safety issue, you have an appeal process, not unlike the spa ordinance. So we have provided due process in a manner that this council's seen before when they considered the spa ordinance. From the Pueblo ordinance, we borrowed the dispensary notice postings that I just referenced that are to be posted in the dispensary. And one of my favorites is we borrowed the weed mowing provisions from the Billings City Code. So if we have to go out, if your home marijuana plant is sitting in the front yard in violation of the ordinance, and we tell you, you need to move your pot plant, put it in your backyard, build something around it and lock it, and you don't do it, we can go and dig it up. We can abate that nuisance and charge you just like we would come in and mow your high weeds. So we did borrow that provision from the weed mowing ordinance that we already have. Let me go back because I'm sure that we'll have questions, most likely here. And I would be glad to take questions.
Thank you, Karen. If you can help us define our tasks here tonight.
The tasks that are left are fairly few. In order to facilitate next week's first reading, a discussion regarding the number of dispensary caps, both medical and retail, should be considered. We did change the ordinance to put in a cap of 12 for medical, 12 for retail. And then we can come back and address that later if we decide that we need to lift affirmatively that medical marijuana cap. So we need some discussion in advance of next week as to whether or not the staff recommendation of 12 appears to be within the range this council's considering. We need to discuss what the council wants to do regarding the potency caps and also the canopy caps. So those are really the three things: dispensary caps, potency caps, and canopy caps.
Okay, thank you very much. And so again, council, the caps are recommended by staff in the current draft are 12 and 12. The cultivation cap, tier 7, which equates to 15,000 square feet, or roughly a little over a third of an acre. And then the potency, there is no staff recommendation as I see it, except that the proposed regulations just adopt the state caps. Well, I don't know if they just repeat those or they just reference back to the state, but there are no additional potency cap being proposed by staff tonight. So
That is correct.
okay, so those are the summaries. Council member, so we'll kick it back to staff. After some discussion, we will open it up for public comment and then continue council discussion. So if we can, try to focus as much as we can on questions for staff at this point. Councilmember Neese and Councilmember Shaw.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a question regarding the caps, you said for recreational marijuana, but there's also a combined recreation marijuana. So how does that, how is your recommended caps going to impact this? Are you saying that you're going to have 12 of one, 12 of the other, but if one business is both medical and recreational, that uses up one of each cap, is that correct?
It actually, in this case, if you have a retail dispensary license, you can also sell to licensed card holders. So a retail license would permit you to sell both to card holders and to recreational users. There would be an additional 12 licenses for businesses that wanted to focus solely on medical marijuana. So in essence, if you're a medical marijuana card holder, a registered card holder, you would have potentially 24 businesses to purchase from.
All right, so we're looking at a cap of 24 medical marijuanas and a cap of 12 recreational is really
Correct.
what this is up to a maximum of. Okay,
Correct.
thanks for that clarification.
Okay, Councilmember Shaw? Okay, thank you very much. Councilmember Ewald.
Thank you, Mayor. So that answered part of my question, but the other part that is unanswered is what would stop a medical marijuana retailer from selling recreational marijuana?
They will be able to for 18 months. And that's under state statute. And they will not be able to do that unless they receive both a state and a local license.
So what's to stop them from doing it?
If we learned that they were selling to outside of a card holder, we would shut them down.
Okay.
And that is one of the beauties of having our statute, our ordinance, the way that it is. We can flat out walk in at any time during business hours. And if we find a violation like that, they're going to lose their license.
Follow up, please, Mayor.
Councilmember Yvonne?
Who's we?
That's going to be the city. We're going to have a way to enforce that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Boyette, Councilmember Purington?
You had a chart up there about the number of people served. It's like 5,300.
Are you talking about?
That one, but you just passed it.
Oh.
Go back one more. There you go.
Okay.
So 5,650 people in Yellowstone County. So if we add 24 more places, we would never get to the middle ground between Illinois and Yellowstone County. We'd actually be in the 3,000 or 4,000 people per business.
Ideally, or hopefully, some of the businesses that are in Yellowstone County and outside of city limits would move into the city limits. Right now, there are 29. If we added 10 more retail facilities, that would put us up to about 39 within the county, but still only 12 within the city.
But that wouldn't ever get us the population per dispensary. We would always be below the 5,600 then. I don't agree with your numbers, I guess. I don't see how we can get any better if we're adding more.
And council can set that cap lower. That is definitely a debate to have. When we talked last time, I believe that we were looking at around the 8 range, similar to Pueblo. So if this council wants to cap that at 8, then that is absolutely a decision by council.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Purington?
Thank you. That was one of my questions, and I'm still mulling that one over. But just moving along, on your canopy, the Tier 7, does the county have a cap on that? I keep equating to what they're doing to what we're doing, and I know there's that zoning thing that they don't do, but can they cap?
Councilmember Purington, mayor, council members, they could institute a cap. They have that ability to institute a cap. I do not believe that they are doing that.
So just to follow up with that one, so if they don't have a cap, and I know some of the information that you sent us had to do a lot with clandestine operations. I guess that's kind of my concern with the county and what we do versus what they're doing. And that's just my opinion, I suppose. But just moving along on the ordinance goals that you had there, one of the last ones that you said was protect local business investments.
Correct.
And I know that Councilmember Shariki has been interested, concerned about the mom and pop stores and, you know, some of these people that are probably out here in the audience as well. And one of the references that you gave us, one of the sheets that we read, it talked about how after this cap goes away, or, you know, this year and a half, this 18 months, then that's when you're going to see a lot more big business come in, and that they basically gobble up the mom and pop, because mom and pop will sell out to them. So I'm just wondering, you know, how are we protecting our local business investment?
Councilmember Purington, when we discussed this last, we know that we have an 18-month period, the first 18 months, where only Montana marijuana providers, medical marijuana providers can sell retail. We discussed the desirability of taking those applications as soon as possible after the first of the year, vetting those to the extent we absolutely need to vet those, and we do, to make sure that everybody coming in meets all of the state criteria for a license, that they meet our zoning provisions. And once those people who are qualified to sell retail marijuana have been determined, then we would want to go ahead and have our lottery within that first 18-month period. And that would protect the people who are here in Montana who have made that investment over the last few years in their businesses to protect that. And if we use up all of the licenses, whatever that number is that this council determines, then we know that those are going to go to our Montana businesses. Recall that those licenses are not transferable.
Thank you.
Okay, Karen, just two quick questions. One, go back to the cultivation canopy tier, what's the largest square footage used now by the largest producer in Yellowstone County? And if you know, if not, that seems like important information to get. So if you know.
Do not know, but I do not believe that anybody's at tier 7.
Okay, so we would be allowing for something that is larger than exists today.
Correct.
Okay, I think that would be valuable information if you could ferret it out some way. And then back to this question of the transition period. Walk me through kind of day to day. January 2nd, let's assume we put in place these regulations. There's a possibility of doing a lottery, et cetera, but we haven't yet done the lottery. Who's going to be operating from day one? I'm assuming it's the one properly or arguably properly licensed operator today. And when does anybody else take effect and start actually selling? And do we have any deadline there? You've already identified 18 months. So I assume our deadline for getting that lottery up and working is something within that 18-month period.
Correct.
But other than that, there may be nobody selling, with the exception of that one operator, for close to 18 months. Is that a fair summary, or some period less than 18 months?
Given that we have so many medical marijuana providers who are already licensed in the state of Montana, they've already been vetted by the state to at least sell medical marijuana. I would anticipate that we could take those applications and have that lottery early on. If we did that during that 18-month period, then those medical marijuana providers could actually sell retail marijuana up until their next license renews, or 18 months, whatever comes first. So we could very well bring in medical marijuana dispensary providers early on, which would permit them to sell retail marijuana during that first 18 months. And then go ahead and look at the retail marijuana dispensaries.
Okay, thank you very much. Councilmember Ronning and Councilmember Ewald.
Thank you. Kind of a similar question, and I guess I just need a little bit of clarity just to really understand this in my mind. So similar question to what Mayor Cole asked, but also going back to what Councilman Neese asked. So I remember in those 7 categories that the state divided up. So there was a medical marijuana category, a adult use recreational marijuana category, and then there was that combined license.
The combined license, as defined by the Montana Code Annotated, is specific to the Indian tribes. So there are 8 that have been allotted. And those are solely for the use of the tribes.
Okay, so in other words, when an applicant comes to the city of Billings, are they going to be applying for a business license for recreational marijuana, an additional business license for medical marijuana, or do they apply for both in the same application and it's just one cost?
They can apply for, I would think, both in the same application. If they are not selected for a retail license, do they want a medical marijuana only license? There
Okay.
may be some that don't want simply a medical marijuana only license.
Okay.
If we happen to have that medical marijuana only license, there may be some that go ahead and get that medical marijuana only license. And then if they happen to get a retail license later on, they can surrender that medical license.
Okay, so there is the possibility that there would be 2 different licenses. Okay. And then to follow up with what the question with Mayor Cole, I guess I just need a little bit more clarification. So just like what he said, come January 1st, January 2nd, no matter what, if they're currently in the county, so we have 1 that's operating in good standing in Billings, but the rest are all in the county. So they're going to be able to sell whatever they want to sell according to the county rules and regulations. But would they be able to, could they be right now purchasing property in the city of Billings in hopes that they could start selling recreational adult use marijuana come January 2nd? And then if they fall into the correct zoning and things like that, can they start doing that, or do they have to wait until we have the lottery system?
They would have to wait until we have the lottery system.
Okay, that clarifies that for me. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Ewalt. I recognize, and then Councilmember Neese.
Thank you, Mayor. Is it safe to assume we're going over these zoning maps under this same deal, or is this another specialty?
I'm going to defer with the maps to Mr. Friday.
But that's under this, right?
We can, if you would like to pull up the maps and take a look at them, we're prepared to do that this evening. Those are in addition to the 3 questions we're really looking for direction on, but certainly those
Okay,
maps
then.
are going to give us more information for you to share with us. We want to tackle that tonight as well. Thank you.
Okay, so my question is then, did you change the distance to residences from 1,000 to a lower amount?
I believe that the recommendation coming out of the zoning commission did change it. That the zoning commission looked at something closer to 350 feet. And this council will need to decide whether or not to adopt that or not. That's my understanding of it.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't know because they got some stuff here that won't make 1,000 feet in the heights on Main Street, so.
That's above my pay grade. I'm going to defer to Mr. Friday.
Okay. Why don't we get questions of Karen out of the way, then we'll turn it over to Wyeth, and then we'll open for public comment. So, Councilmember Neese?
Thank you, Mayor. Karen, I think when we talked about the canopy caps, the canopy caps, we were talking about trying to do it on a per 1,000 population. So you're recommending 24 dispensaries in the city. So what is that what are you coming up with a per 1,000 then?
So there would still only be 12 dispensaries that would be open to the public to sell to any person over the age of 21, or if under 21, but a card holder, they could also sell to that individual. Medical marijuana dispensaries are not to be open to the public. They're open to registered card holders only.
But they're going to be dispensaries in the city. So we have 24 dispensaries. What is that what are you working on that per 1,000 then?
Are you talking about the saturation?
Yes. For the city, not the county saturation, we're talking about the city saturation. So when we talked about some of the other areas as far as how many, when we came up with that kind of number of 8 and stuff like that, we were looking at a per 1,000. So you're just picking on a number of 12. type of dispensary. But I guess I thought we were looking at focusing it more on a per population. So as the city grows, that cap grows automatically once we hit a certain number. And so are you just saying we're going to have in the ordinance a flat number and then we just have to address it from time to time? Or are we going to do a cap per population so that as the city grows, the cap can grow as well?
It would be a fixed number. We would not want it to float based on a formula in an ordinance.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. We'll turn it over to Wyeth if there are any other questions for Karen. Oh, Councilmember Purinton, okay. Councilmember Purinton.
So, this is my dumb question for the evening. So if we only have two, one in good standing in the city limits, and come January 2nd, if the measure goes through with a yes to have dispensaries in Billings. So that one dispensary in Billings can start selling recreational marijuana.
Correct, as long as they are in a zoned area.
Okay, so where are they going to buy their marijuana because they don't have it cultivated, or are they growing their own in order to be able to sell it recreationally?
Most medical marijuana providers right now are growing their own marijuana because that's what they're selling. So they will be selling that product to people both for recreational use and for medical use.
But won't they be limited to what they can grow, given their, I guess, right now it'd be a storefront or whatever they're doing. They don't have the capacity.
I suspect there'll be some ramping up of that. There is within the Department of Revenue regulations.
Right.
They are supposed to be working within their current canopy levels.
Correct.
That said, the state at this time does not share that information with us as to what any given provider's canopy footprint is that's allowed by the state. But they're supposed to stay within that footprint until such time as their license is renewed and increased.
So are they also, does the medical marijuana have the same potency caps that the recreational does?
It does not. It does not have the same caps because the theory is that's considered medicine and you may have a stronger potency than you can for recreational use.
So that part of their business, if they go to the recreational, will be regulated at that point with potency caps or whatever it is and labeling and.
So you would be able to sell some products to registered card holders that could not be sold to the general public legally.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Treacy, and then Wyeth will ask you to comment on the maps. Councilmember Treacy?
On the canopy calculation page, it would be really useful if we could find out approximately how many pounds of marijuana is produced in those spaces.
I don't even know how to dial up that information.
I'm sure some of the people who are growing in the area right now have some idea as to how much they're producing.
Like in.
Not the canopy.
Oh, okay.
Canopies.
Well.
So, how much is going to be produced in a 15,000 square foot canopy?
Yeah, we really have no idea if that's enough to supply the continental United States or one very hungry Dorito eater. I have no clue, but maybe there's a way to get to it.
And people will be able to grow at home. I'm sure that'll nip a little bit in the market, but.
Okay, thank you. Wyeth, can you comment on the revised maps that were distributed as part of the weekly report on Thursday afternoon, I believe?
Mayor and council, yes, Kevin's going to help here with bringing those up. You have, while we start off here, so there's a packet that was left at your desk tonight that has got the two maps that you got in the weekly report on Friday, and also has the draft zoning ordinance that's coming to you next week that's in your packet for October 25th. So you've seen all this information, but there is a copy of those for everyone that was provided tonight. And so there are two maps, and the one you've seen before, which is the pink, has the pink shading of property. And let's see, that's the cultivation processing one in the folder. And that's basically because, and I'll try to not get too confused here. So when the zoning commission reviewed the draft ordinance that went to them, what went to them had the 1,000-foot separation from residential zone property, schools, parks with playgrounds, churches, daycare centers. Those were all 1,000 feet at that time. What they recommended to you, what's coming to you on next Monday, is that the dispensaries, those distances go down. 350 feet from residentially zoned property, 600 feet from a dispensary to a school, park with playground, and actually they struck daycare centers out of completely out. And so the pink one still shows you if you're a manufacturer, producer, transportation, marijuana transportation provider, those pink areas is still where you are able to operate, and a dispensary could operate there too. The green map, which Kevin has up now, it's like fluorescent yellow here up on there, is where dispensaries, additional areas where dispensaries could operate based on those reduced separation distances that the zoning commission is recommending to you. And I want to be really clear, this was in the weekly that was sent to you, and we've been repeating this in different places where these maps are posted. This doesn't mean that I can go out and find a little fluorescent yellow sliver and boom, I'm all set to go. We have to look, this is showing you generally where these areas are. Someone has to come in with a parcel, with their property and say, this is where I want my dispensary to be, and we have to check all those separations. So this is giving you a high level idea of, yes, with the recommendations from the zoning commission, it opened it up a little bit. You see some areas along Main Street, you see some more areas along Montana Avenue, more areas in the southwest area where the original 1,000-foot separations put some of those businesses, and then also a few areas along Grand Avenue, a small portion off of Airport Highway 3 that's away from it still has to meet that 600 feet, so it's not right on Highway 3, but it's up in that area, and then a few other small spaces that have met that new reduced separation. But it's just important to understand that we're going to have to look at each one of those, a location, to make sure it actually is in fact meeting all those separations at that time. So it's not a absolute that each of those little green patches means that that's where a dispensary could be. So I just want to make sure everybody gets that, because when you're doing all these when we're doing all these separations with the map, there's the potential that there's an area that might have been missed. So, but anyway, the idea is that yes, it opens it up, it provides more areas for the dispensaries, but not for the other uses.
Okay, thank you. Questions for Wyeth about the revised maps? Councilmember Neese and Purington.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, real quick, I only just saw the ordinance here, read through it, but I thought Nicole mentioned there was a section that she had forgot to include in the ordinance. Is that in this section? Because I can't remember exactly the section she mentioned. I think it had to do with rebuilding or something like that if something was burned down. She said she had forgot to put that in the original ordinance, and the zoning commission added that. Is that added in here as well? I didn't see that highlighted.
Councilmember Neese and Mayor and Council, I know one of the things that we added that's in here are the required, that where it states under each of these sections that the separations are not subject to like a variance or some kind of reduction. So that was something that we had to add in that was missing. And then I think the language, I know we've got the language or the reference, I have to look here, but to that issue of the rebuild, being able to come in and request, that's through the special review process. So I'd have to double check that, but we did discuss that as well. But I know those areas where you see like under B on page 5, B, and then it's actually B and then R1B is where we've got that, there's not a variance or like a waiver from those required separations. That was something we
All
added.
right, thank you. Mayor, another question, if you don't mind. I was on the committee when we were looking at some of these, and we recommended the 1,000-foot at the time, really to kind of keep these out of the residential neighborhoods. I think there's some comments about how some of these are in the south side, they're in the more of the low-income areas. And the zoning commission now has recommended putting back into some of these areas that we thought maybe it'd be best to put it out. Is there a map of the city or through HUD or something that shows the low-income areas of the city that maybe we could then say, well, let's have 1,000-foot separation from low-income areas or something like that, or 2,000 feet, something like that, where we can actually protect those neighbors? Because those are the neighbors I think that were talked about trying to protect the most from that. Is there a map like that we can overlay on this to come up with something?
Councilmember Neese and Mayor and Council, following HUD requirements through census tracts, those are, if you're specifically looking at where the lower income areas are per census, there is a way to look at those tracts and where they are. Yes, I mean, we've got those because we have to identify those when we do some of the HUD analysis that we do for CDBG and for some of the programs that community development administers. So the answer would be, yeah, we could identify those tracts and show, highlight those census tracts on a map, and you could see where those are located. One thing I just want to mention just on that same point. So one of the things that the zoning commission was concerned, that 0.8 of a mile distance was what was brought up. And certainly when you are, given where some of our industrial areas are closer to the interstate, there are neighborhoods, residential neighborhoods within 0.8 of a mile. There's actually 0.8 of a mile is not a small distance actually. So in fact, yes, there are some residential areas within that distance. And in fact, it's kind of challenging across the whole city. An 0.8 of a mile is far enough that you can touch neighborhoods from a lot of the commercial areas. But that was the concern that was brought up there. We talked at that a little bit too about there's also some major transportation corridors down there that separate some of those areas. So there's a lot going on, but certainly that was the issue.
Yeah, I would just add, I guess, I would be interested in seeing that if other council members would be interested in looking at that as a potential compromise to some of the limitations or the reduction of the footage. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Purinton and Councilmember Joya will open up for public comment. Councilmember Purinton?
So, Wyeth, on these separations that the zoning commission presented, so you also added the CMU 1 and CMU 2. Mm-hmm. Is that because of those separations? That's why those two districts were included?
So no, that's another piece of this, is that those two, the zoning commission also recommended that the areas that we move out from just heavy commercial, industrial 1 and 2 to commercial mixed use 1 and commercial mixed use 2, which also, and we hadn't gotten to that, but that's also where you see on the map, right, you've got the separations decreased and you've got those added in. So it actually both provides additional space within those three original districts, the commercial, heavy commercial, and the 2 industrial, and it provides some areas in the CMU 1 and 2 zones, which is where you see a few of those areas popping up on like Grand Avenue. There is some heavy commercial on Main, so that both opened that up, but also provided some areas there. So they actually proposed that not just related to the separations. They thought that there needed to be more options available for the location of the dispensaries, not just in those districts.
So follow up, Mr. Mayor.
Please once, and we'll go to Councilmember Joy.
Okay, so I watched that zoning commission meeting, and they really had no basis from even their own, saying what they were saying when they were discussing it. And so I would definitely go back to the subcommittee and their suggestions of the 1,000 feet. I think the 350 feet from residents, I would not agree with that one at all. And so for me personally, I would go back to what you guys did in your meeting as opposed to what the zoning commission has advised, just because they were just throwing numbers out, and they even said that in their meeting. So I was concerned whenever they
Point of order,
started
Mayor?
decreasing.
I don't hear a
I
question.
think Councilmember Pirro is wrapping up there, so we got that point. Councilmember Joy?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Director Friday, did the zoning commission give a rationale for changing the separations? Or were they just throwing out numbers? I'd like a clarification on the thinking behind, if it was verbalized, what the thinking behind in changing the separations was. Thank you.
Yes, Councilmember Joy and Mayor and Council. So there, as I said, so a couple things. One was, one of the rationalizations for the changing of the separation distances was, and actually to some extent the commercial districts, but the separations was certainly looking at that distance to some of the residential neighborhoods, and the fact that basically if we left, if the separation's the 1,000 foot and what was all left in, that it focused it in the one area on the map that has the pink, and it was close to neighborhoods that they saw as being lower income than other parts of the city and in those areas. So that was part of the reason for that. The adding of the commercial CMU 1 and 2 was mainly to, and there's a lot of discussion in the memo that you'll be, that just got posted today about this, but all their discussion, but was to look at more options for where dispensaries could be. So it was also feeling like, why, we understand we want to try and limit them to some extent in the city, but we want to provide some more areas where they can be located closer to other parts of the city, other neighborhoods, commercial areas, et cetera. So those were sort of the two reasons they said, okay, we want to add the CMU 1 and 2, and we want to adjust those separations.
Follow up, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, follow up, and then we'll open up for public hearing or public comment.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. So the 350 feet would be consistent with separations from what other uses?
Councilmember Joy and Mayor and Council, so the 350 and the 600 feet brings it to the separations that casinos and bars under the current zoning code are required for separation. So that also matches with that.
Okay, thank you very much. This time we'll open it up for public comment on item number 3, our marijuana regulations update. If anybody would like to comment, please come forward. And just ask that you keep your comments to 3 minutes. Tell us your name and address. And please make a line in the back if anybody would like to. That way we know that there's still somebody going to
Dennis Overstead, 78 27th Street West, number 122. I'd like to talk a little bit about marijuana in the county, and I'd appreciate it. I was at the county commissioners meeting with Councilman Pam Parrington, and I just had one question. I do know the county and city, I think the county is dragging their feet a little bit, because when Mrs. Parrington asked him, if they would cooperate with us, they had a lot of work to do. It seems like they had one lady there that didn't know enough what was going on. And all I wanted to know is, what kind of time factor do we have here between the county and city? How long do they have before we can get together with the county? Well, how long is that going to be?
we don't know. That's the short
Okay.
answer, but thank you for calling our attention to the.
We are still waiting on the county then.
That's right.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, thank you. Next.
Hi, my name is Zach, 1401 Chanel Loop. Couple things I want to touch on. I addressed some of them Thursday, and I appreciate those of you guys who made it out. It means a lot that you guys care what we have to say and want some of our input for real. That I really appreciate that. So, number one, the potency limits. I discussed this on Thursday. Cannabis is not a crop that we can dilute or control the potency of. Putting a crop out there requires months and months of work and staffing and labor and power and infrastructure and lab testing and dozens and dozens or hundreds of thousands of dollars to put a crop out, pass it on testing, package it, and now we're going to get past testing all the way to the very end and say, oh, I can't sell this in city limits. And I'm stuck with a crop that, again, I have no control over, or I'm not able to dilute to meet the demands of a potency cap. And so that's something I would really like, hopefully you guys to address, being that it's just out of the control. If I could control nature anymore, I would. But beyond that, something I'd like to address too, she brought up the number of dispensaries in city limits that are currently active, I think 29 online. In the market that we're in, the medical market, we are stuck in what's called vertically integrated. So we have to produce, extract, process, and sell out of our own stores. My expectation, and I think kind of the general consensus in the industry, is that a lot of those stores are going to move into just being cultivators or just extractors or something like that. So I think we're going to see a lot of those people who don't necessarily want to have a shop fade away and just be doing what they enjoy, which is cultivating or something like that. So I think that that's something I'd ask you to keep in mind when you do set the dispensary cap, is that it's not more than likely going to be a whole lot of dispensaries, as some of them do transition into what they're hoping to be. Beyond that, something on the slide that I can appreciate is protecting local investments. I think that, I speak on behalf of anyone else here in the industry who's operating in Yellowstone County. Getting into city limits has long been something all of us have wanted to do. There's 450 roughly providers in the state of Montana and 29 here in Yellowstone County. I would ask, when we do come up with the system for the lottery and for getting a license to be in city limits, that first call comes to those in Yellowstone County, those of us that this is our community. I was born and raised here. I went to school here, graduated college from MSU Billings, and this is home. So I'd like to see those of us who are community members stay in the community. And thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next.
Connor Lorenz, 6339 Canyonwoods Drive. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I actually really don't have a whole lot to say after that, because pretty much everything he just said is exactly what I came here to say. There was one question, it came from Councilwoman Purington earlier, on how we can help, our mom and pop shops succeed. And my answer to that would be, by not putting on a bunch of excessive restrictions. I think what a lot of people are looking past right now is, although, a lot of these restrictions are necessary, and don't get me wrong, but there are some that are 100% just going to fuel the black market. And I think that people are looking past that. And I guess that's something that I'd like you guys all to consider is, the more restriction that's going on towards legal dispensaries and those of us that are operating legally, I guess the more freedom that a lot of these black market guys have, because they're able to get flower with higher potency, et cetera. So thank you guys for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Next.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Brett, 2303 Beloit Street. I just wanted to touch mostly on the canopy issues. That was something that I feel as someone in the industry, I could kind of give some perspective from my side of things. You guys talked about the tier 7 being 15,000 square feet, kind of wondering how that's going to be utilized. For someone like myself, I yield about 8 pounds out of my little 100 square foot room. So if we broke those numbers upscaled, your 15,000 would break down to about 880 pounds every 60 to 75 days. That's just flowering time. You also have to factor in our drying, lab testing, packaging, everything like that. But I broke that all the way down to roughly about 250 pounds per month. But that's not just raw material that's going to be, sold purely as flour. The processors will be making extracts, edibles, everything like that. So that number does decrease down. I truly don't feel that that's a surplus for your community or the demand that you guys are going to have with the population here. The other thing I did have a little bit of questions about was mentioned previously, the air quality. As someone that's in the industry, that's not an issue I've been made aware of. So I was kind of curious to see maybe the sources on that and see what health risks we do have posed to the air quality. And if that is a true concern, I think as a city you can implement some health inspections of some sort to make sure that you are taking care of the employees at that facility. That's really all I have for you. I appreciate you taking my time today.
Thank you. Next.
Tina Walker-Smith, 4100 Murphy. I'm sure you all know by now. But I had to, I just wanted to say thank you so much for the meeting on Wednesday. I think it was really, really great. It finally felt like we were heard, so thank you guys so much for doing that. Thank you, Councilman Purington, for going to the Yellowstone County Commissioners meeting. I think that actually made several of the dispensary owners who are in the county wake up to what's going on in the city. And I've been trying to for months to get people to pay attention, and now they finally are, being nervous that any of the limiting rules for the city could also apply to the county. So thank you very much for that. Did the chief happen to get us any numbers on the crime rate? As we're still talking about that as it's a bad thing and yet have no actual data. Okay, cool. And also the lottery management fee as well. I didn't hear an update on that either. And there was a question about how do we know who's selling what to who? There is already a tracking system. We've had it for at least 3 years. I think it's 4. So anything that goes out from a legal dispensary is tracked. It's tracked who it goes to, when it was sold, how much is sold, how much they paid. The taxes now will be calculated differently for recreational when it begins as far as medical. So there is not a concern of, oh, the recreational or the medical shop is going to open and sell to recreational illegally. That's not going to happen. All of their product is completely tracked seed to sale in that system. So that's already going on today. And I didn't see the draft online yet. Does anybody know where that is?
A copy was attached to our weekly, it was sent out to all council members. If you go and look for our city council weekly, that I think was Thursday afternoon, but maybe it exists somewhere else online as well. Chris, do you know?
It would also, the agenda for next Monday came out earlier, or this afternoon, so you'll find it in either of those 2 places.
So the draft will be on the agenda for next week?
Yes, for. It's already out. Yep, it's already out there.
And where is it? Where's that?
If you go online to billingsmt.gov, you can find it under council
Because I went to the agenda for this meeting and all it was a bunch of the quotes.
Yeah, we're talking about the meeting for a week from today. It's
Right.
on that agenda now.
Right, I
so-
would like to see the, okay, so it was posted this afternoon.
Yes.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Any other public comment on item number 3? No one's coming forward, so we'll close the public comment period. Council, we got about 10 minutes before normal break time, but we can extend that if it seems appropriate, or we can break at that time. Councilmember Ronning.
Thank you. I just actually wanted to ask Brett, thank you for that information. Could you email that to us at council@billingsmt.gov? That was really, I really appreciated his math and the information he provided. So there's no way that was going to be held in my brain, and you spoke too fast for me to write down. So if you could send that to us, that was really wonderful. council@billingsmt.gov. Thank you.
Thank you. And to answer Tina's question about the lottery fee, for staff, is it correct to assume that that is spelled out in the 90 pages or so that is the new regulations? Is that included in that document?
I'm sorry, is what included in the document?
The question about what the fees for applying in the lottery are and things like that.
No, we actually don't have that information yet, but we're in the process of trying to gather that.
Okay, so that doesn't exist. And do we have an answer about whether the chief is working on the crime statistic issue, or whether that exists?
The bottom line is there's not much data there. So I don't know if there'd be anything the chief would want to add, but there's not much data to back up any of impact of something that's not legal.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Councilmember Yakovich.
Thank you, Honored Council. I'd like to speak on behalf of Jim Ronquillo, who is the former city councilman. One thing for sure is we don't want as much inundated on the south side. So I agree with Mr. Councilman Neese that we should really look in that. And I mean, it doesn't take, we've had the maps 100 times here. So the area around there is all low income. I mean, we've seen it 100 times, so good to look at it more, but I'm really concerned about impacting the south side and north and southwest corridor. With that in mind, I guess, so I'd like to encourage staff to really look at this more with what Mr. Neese has said, Councilmember Neese. Likewise, one of my questions would be, how many dispensaries can be in a block? You know, because I can, you know, again, the south side inundated with all of them on the south side, which is unconscionable. And I can't figure out how they all, you know, fix this all up. But one thing I would like to even find a compromise, if not 1,000 feet, maybe like 800 feet or something. So anyway, those are just my answers. And the other one, I guess since I'm on a roll here, is I'm a little bit confused by our presentation, where last time the presentation was, let's set the bar low and then we'll raise it higher later on. And I get this impression that we're already setting it high, and so I'm confused about that and not happy with that. So those are the things that I brought up. So thank you, Council, for listening.
Thank you very much. And Wyeth, on that point, if the goal was to reduce exposure to low-income neighborhoods, the zoning commission's approach of doubling the areas where you can sell it in those areas seems incredibly counterproductive. And so I would put forward the thesis that what the zoning commission has done by their suggestion has significantly increased exposure of lower income neighborhoods. Do you have any proof that that's not the case?
Mayor and council, so yeah, I mean, one of the things obviously we didn't have available at the zoning commission meeting immediately was the mapping.
Sure.
And so we knew that that was going to change things. And so I would say, if you look at the pink, the original one, and the 1,000 feet, and you look at where Councilmember Yakowicz is talking about, you know, the south side area, really, and then you look at the changes that, yeah, actually, the change provides closer proximity to some of those neighborhoods than the original proposal does, just because of what opens up with both the distance reduction and the CMU 1 and 2. So I think that's probably, it doesn't mean that the original isn't within 0.8 of a mile of neighborhoods. That's correct. Yeah, thanks. So this is the original 1,000 foot. So if you look at the south side, I mean, really you're seeing that it's southwest, further west, and then obviously proximity then to those 0.8 of a mile. Yes, it hits neighborhoods all the way around, you know, kind of both south and north. But if you then go to the proposal with the reduced distances, then you see that it actually does pull in. Now, I have to say, like, that square, you know, kind of in the right center is the sugar beet, like, disposal area. So probably not going to see a lot of activity right there. So that, I mean, you have to be careful about what areas you're seeing, but still you see along the Montana Avenue, First Avenue, or Lower Frontage Road, yes, it brings it closer into some of those areas.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Trickey and Councilor Purington, and just a reminder, Council, before we get distracted on this one too much, we still have those 3 questions that Karen raised for us. Councilor Trickey?
I want to address that issue. If you look at the 1,000 foot map, the one neighborhood that is really, really affected by it is Central Terry. And Central Terry is a neighborhood that is under stress for a number of different reasons. It's one that is being greatly impacted on generations moving out and renters coming in. Essentially, the nightmare that Mayor Yakowicz is talking about that happened on the south side is happening right now in Central Terry. The crime rate in that area is really bad. And frankly, with the 1,000 foot limit, and without the changes that the zoning commission made, the only realistic place to put it that is anywhere near a major street is in that area. Everything else is all the way out on the southwest corridor, you know, out there on Gable, you know, and that, yeah, okay, we don't have any residences out there, but, that's also not going to be a prime place for it. And the areas in that 1,000-foot map, and even in this map, on the south side, a lot of that stuff doesn't have available commercial space. I mean, there is some stuff on First Avenue along in there, but a lot of that green area in there is railroad land as well. And the triangle up at the top is the stockyard that's up there, So that 1,000-foot initial plan that we put out there basically puts all of these businesses either around Central Terry or out there on Gable. And I don't think that's fair to Central Terry.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Triki, Councilmember Shaw? Well, I'm sorry?
Puritan.
Puritan, I'm sorry. What did I
That's
say?
okay.
Triki, oh.
That's okay. So Karen, I just wanted to ask the question about health inspections because there was some information on the staff memo about air quality. Is that part of that? I did not see it.
In the ordinance, that is part of the process, the initial health inspection and then ongoing health inspections.
Okay. So the other question that I have, and I think Councilmember Yakowicz brought it up, we do not have a separation now between businesses. Is that correct? And could we?
That would be part of the zoning ordinance. Right now, there is not a separation between dispensaries. If you had a pretty low number of dispensaries, the need for separation becomes less.
Correct.
However, my understanding is there's not a separation between businesses for the dispensaries.
Okay, so, Mr. Mayor, going back to the three questions, can we do that now, or do you want to finish?
Please. Well, Council, it's 7:30, your choice. I don't think we're going to get through this, so why don't we take the questions that are before us, Councilmember Purington and Councilmember Shaw, and then take a break and then have to come back, okay?
Sure.
So, but Councilmember Purington, if you've got anything, and we'll turn it over to Councilmember Shaw.
Well, I was just going to say, with regard to the canopy, I would go with the staff suggestion on canopy. My preference would be the 10, the cap.
To tier 10?
No.
I think the dispensary cap.
Dispensary cap, yeah, to 10. And then, what was the third one?
The cultivation cap.
The
Oh, no, you already done that. Potency.
potency. Well, I would personally prefer that we did knock it down if we could from what the state has. But you're telling me that you don't think that's a good idea, so if I have to go with your recommendation on that one, so.
I cannot give council a rational basis based on my review, which is what is necessary.
And I would also go along with, or I would go back to the 1,000-foot separation with zoning.
Okay, thank you very much. Councilmember Shaw.
Thank you. Your Honor, I was going to suggest that we have a committee meeting scheduled already for tomorrow on this topic. So I think we can maybe speed this up a little bit, is my opinion. And if people just communicate to your committee member, we can sit down and hash all of this out tomorrow, but that'll get us through things a little faster tonight. Thanks.
Okay, all right, you can consider that. We'll come back. We will take a break, Council. Members of the public, we're going to be back and get started no later than 7:40. That's 9 minutes, but if we can get started before then, we will. Everybody can take a seat, we'll get started.
If we end up with
Put it next to your shop.
it's all gonna end up in that area right there. And do you want to have a conversation about this? We will have a conversation about this.
Okay, welcome back, everybody. Thank you for being here. When we took our break, it was before council, and we were discussing some of the three specific issues that Karen Tracy had raised for us, specifically potency, dispensary cap, and canopy cap. The little subcommittee will be meeting tomorrow at 3 o'clock, I believe. But I think that committee would benefit from hearing from all council members tonight, so I don't want you to punt too much to that committee. Just to help our conversation go, I'll put forth a proposition, which is that on the potency, we really do not have good objective criteria to impose those restrictions to be less than what's in the state. I'd be concerned about that, although I do think it is something we should continue to research, because when you can have edibles and distilled product that's close to 100% THC, I'm just a layperson, but that seems like a reason to be concerned. But I'm not quite sure we want to be the first to go down that path. That's my thought on that issue. Back to council. How do you want to proceed here? Councilmember Shaw?
Thank you. I just wanted to bring up the subcommittee, but since you've asked for our thoughts, I'll just go through them real fast. On the dispensary cap, I'm fine with what staff has proposed. I think 12 retail makes sense to me, spread throughout the city. I also favor the zoning commission's map. And my pitch to the rest of council would be, if we're really concerned about congregation in low-income areas, allowing more areas in the city where it could be spread out will help alleviate that. That's my take. On the canopy cap, I don't know enough about this to know what size is right, so if staff has recommended tier 7, I'm all right with that. And I agree with the mayor that we should not touch potency. Thank you.
Okay, other council members. Councilmember Ewald.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm a firm believer when you start something like this, if you start low, you can always move up, but if you start with 12 of each, it's pretty tough to move down. So I think that we ought to be looking at lower numbers. And I think we should keep the distances at the 1,000 like we originally, and we can always change that if we want to, but I think we need to keep that distance. 0.8 of a mile is over 4,000 feet, and that's the common user. So why would we move them within 350 feet of residential areas? And everybody's talking about low income. Low income kids aren't the only ones that'll have a chance to get in on this stuff, or low income households. It can be anybody. So I don't think we need to just select out low income residential neighborhoods.
Thank you very much. Other comments from other council members? Council member, I'm sorry, Neese, you got your hand up?
I do. Thank you, Mayor. I do think I think the idea of starting out low, like we talked about, is a better way to look at this, and instead of setting something too high. You know, I think the initial recommendation by staff at 8 cap of canopy of 8 was probably reasonable. It was a little higher than I would have liked to have seen, but I think that is reasonable if you start looking at based upon the population.
And I apologize, what did you say was preferable for a canopy cap?
I'm sorry, no, that was the dispensary cap.
Oh, dispensary cap, okay,
yeah,
I'm sorry,
yeah.
thank you.
That was 8. And on the canopy cap, you know, my concern is, you know, 15,000 square feet is quite a bit of space, and there's no limitation on how many grows we can have, and that we're not limiting the number of those. That's going to use up a lot of resources. You know, I don't know about the numbers that were given to us as far as what they grow, how much it produces. You know, you can only really produce, you know, sell what you produce, but eventually they're going to start shipping it in different parts of the state maybe, and maybe Billings becomes the grow operation for the whole state, and then they transport it. I don't know. But I am a little concerned about the 15,000. I'd rather see us start a little bit lower. on that. I was looking at more than 5 to 6,000. Some of the one dispensary I looked at, you know, their operation was a couple thousand, and they're pretty decent size. And so those would be my recommendation. I still would like to see some kind of overlay on the low-income housing area on the map, just to see where we're at, and maybe that, if not now, maybe added later in zoning to kind of keep those areas out of the area where they can put those. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Joy.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I would just like to really give a lot of praise to Assistant City Attorney Tracy for excellent work in finding peer-reviewed articles that delve deep into the issues that we're really considering when it comes to the health and well-being of our community. And I looked up every reference that you had there, and I actually read the articles, and I realized how very really ignorant we are of human psychology and human psychiatry, the whole entire issues of cannabis use and people who have cannabis use disorders. And looking through all the literature and the comments about how people are impacted, genetic links, all of those different things, the link between major depression, schizophrenia, and those things are it's just incredible how complex the human psyche is and how complicated human behavior is. So I really want to give you some praise for that and really appreciate that hard work you've done. In terms of the recommendations from staff, I will make my comments to Councilmember Tricky, and he can bring those up in the committee so that my input will be through him for your committee meeting. But thank you so much for the hard work on that. And I think, you know, looking at our community, there are so many people who are concerned about this, and I don't think that there's anyone here at this table that doesn't have likewise real concerns about how this will impact the health and well-being of our community. So I think we take it really seriously. I'm not sure that it's all within our control, but we take it very seriously, so thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Boyette.
I was not going to say this tonight, but I talked to a cousin in Canada, Calgary, last night. His son is 18 years old, and they're in the high rent district. I have to tell you this. And the kid's a freshman in college, and he was stoned at the dining room table, and there's continuing fights even on the FaceTime we were on last night. It was very upsetting, but dispensary caps, I agree with Councilman Yakovich that when we started this, I thought we said, let's start low and work our way up. I think that's an easier program to work versus trying to bring it back down. The canopy caps, 15,000 square feet is 12 times bigger than my house. I don't know, how much room do you really need? I don't know that the council was given why you picked number 7, any justification for that 15,000. And the potency, I think we should stick with the state. I can't imagine how many code enforcement operators we'd have to have. The training, and it sounds like a lot of work. But maybe after 18 months, we would learn, and that's why we need this 18 months to figure all of this out. So that's why if we keep it low to start with. I also drove that big green area. That's a rich place. That's a high industrial area. A lot of money made there. There were no residents in there. Of course, there's residents across the interstate, freeway, and railroad tracks, but no one's going to go that way. They're not going to walk across that. So I didn't see that as a problem. So I'd like to see the recommendations from our committee at our next meeting.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Brown.
Thank you, Mayor. I have nothing really insightful to say. I just want to get it out there that I absolutely support the lower number. I know we talked 8. I'd like to even see it start lower, but I could accept 8. And as far as the potency, there's no way we could enforce it. I mean, I just don't know how we could enforce that. So I would recommend we just go with the state for the time being, until we can figure all that out. And the tiers, I think, like tier 5 is probably a good starting point. I think it's going to be a while before we get anybody even to that. I'm hoping anyway. So that's kind of my thoughts.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Tricky?
My only comment right now is that I know that the one in the city is probably larger than a tier 7. And I know that there are a number in the county that are probably in about the 40,000 square foot range. The thing that worries me about drawing a number out of the air, looking at just that thing right there, is we don't know how much revenue is being generated by those spaces. We don't know how much TC is being generated in those spaces. We don't know if a 15,000 square foot one is a mom and pop shop, or if it's, a decent sized industry or anything like that. We are basically just pulling numbers out of the air at this point. I can tell you this, that one mature plant probably takes somewhere around 25 square feet of area that's around it.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to ask staff a question, which is a little bit about timing. Is this 86-page document on council agenda for approval Monday night? This is going to be another Obamacare thing. We really don't have time to read the document. I mean, it's very impressive. I mean, if it weighs,
I get
a lot.
paid by the page.
Yeah.
Bird. I'm used to my old job where I got paid by the hour. You've got a week to study this. We're going to go over it tomorrow in depth as to why the provisions are there and walk through the logic of it. Again, the goal was to not impose anything greater than what was already being imposed at the state level, unless it was a de minimis type of burden such as signage, posting in a dispensary, that would be a relatively inexpensive thing to do. So a lot of that is duplicative of the same rules by which dispensaries and other marijuana businesses will have to operate. We just want the ability to enforce it. Plus, I get paid by the word.
Okay, again, Karen, just on the timing, we feel a certain need to have the effective date, the 30-day effective date, take place before January 1st. So you back 30 days, and we have to have second reading, we have to have first reading. In theory, we could have special meetings and run our first reading or our second reading right after our first reading, give a couple days, which would put us to second reading somewhere at the end of November. This is almost the end of October, but not quite. So theoretically, we would have more time than actually having to wrap this up in the next couple weeks, theoretically speaking. Chris, you want to comment on timing?
Well, we've built into the system, without special meetings, one additional meeting. So, if first reading is to take place on the 8th on the 25th of October, or if it gets bumped 2 weeks to November 8th, second reading needs to be by the, sorry, I can't look at a map here. It needs to be by the November 22nd meeting, so that effective date takes place prior to January, unless you schedule any special meetings. And then I would just ask to the meeting, yes, it is, yes, it's 8, let's just round up. You got 100 pages in front of you. My question to you is, what are the policy issues you've given us direction on? Have we done a good job of making sure that those policy issues are covered in our document? That, to me, should be the focus of the 11 of you, is making sure that those policy components are clearly implemented based on your direction to us.
Okay, just one clarification, then Councilmember Boyette and Councilmember Triki. The 30-day effective date, does anybody know, recollection that we can shorten that in the case of an emergency? We already, is that not the case? We already declared emergency for kind of a zoning emergency for purposes of our zoning, or is that 30-day locked-in state statute?
That
Gina's nodding
30-day
her head
minimum is statutory, because you're looking at a permanent ordinance here. You've already, as you mentioned, you already took advantage of the emergency situation. We're now looking to set a permanent set of regulations in place.
Okay, thank you very much. Councilmember Boyette, Triki, and Ronning.
Thank you. One of the documents we got is 9 pages. It's a smaller one, but it has number 2. It says combined marijuana uses.
Are you looking at the Department of Department of Revenue, or is that the zoning?
Zoning.
That's a zoning.
That would probably be how zoning defined.
Okay, let me just read you this. It says a marijuana dispensary may not be combined with another marijuana use such as transportation, cultivation, testing, or processing, unless the required separation distance can be met for the dispensary use. I thought in Billings or in Yellowstone County, one business did it all. This would negate that?
If I understand the question, if you are a dispensary and you also want to manufacture a product, you have to meet the separation for every one of those uses, because a manufacturing use may involve the use of chemicals, things that might pose a greater physical risk to the surrounding neighborhoods. So there could be different rules depending on whether or not it was a dispensary or not in terms of zoning, and you would have to meet every single one of those safety uses. Because if I'm stripping marijuana and using like butane, that is certainly going to be a greater safety risk involving fire, explosions, things of that nature than a mere dispensary would. Those are different dangers that may require different separations.
Chris, you want to comment, and then back to Councilmember Boyette?
I think Councilmember Boyette is just asking straight up, based on his reading of the language that came from the zoning commission, does it mean what he said? And I would ask Wyeth to help us understand what.
Yeah, Mayor and Council and Councilmember Boyette. This was in the draft before. This isn't anything that changed with the zoning commission. This is just saying basically what Karen was explaining. So if you have a dispensary, so if I have manufacturing and a dispensary in the same business, then I still have to meet whatever the separations are for dispensary. And if there's currently separations for manufacturing anyway, you have to meet all those in that same location. You can't just, like if you can't have, it applies to all the separations if those are combined.
Wouldn't it be simpler to just, wouldn't it be simpler to just to say where you have multiple uses, the most restrictive, i.e. largest separation applies?
Potentially. I guess we're trying to make sure we've got it all spelled out in here. So yeah, I mean, I guess what I'm saying is, if you look at the maps with the green and the red and the pink, so if I'm a manufacturer right now in that proposal, I can only be in that pink area. I can't go up to where the dispensaries are allowed. So, but if I'm going to be a dispensary down in that area, then I've also got to meet, whatever those requirements are for separations for those different uses. So,
Councilor Boyette, are you satisfied? And then,
no, not really, but.
Okay. Councilor Brown, are you on this topic? Because I recognize some other councilor. Okay, well, go ahead if you want to just follow up on that.
So I kind of brought this up originally. The question I have is it strictly says a marijuana dispensary may not be combined with another marijuana use. Period. That's what it says. So it doesn't sound to me like it's, if you do combine it, then you have to do this. It just flat says you can't do it.
it says unless, so it says a marijuana dispensary may not be combined with another use such as transportation, cultivation, testing, or processing unless the required separation distances can be met for the dispensary use. So that's where it's saying you have to meet those separations to be able to have the dispensary use as part of whatever those other uses are.
I guess I didn't read that way, because I would think the dispensary would be less restrictive than the others.
It's the most restrictive, right?
So unless the required separation distance could be met for the dispensary use.
Well, you can't have the, right now, under any of the proposals, you can't have manufacturing in CMU 1. So you're stuck. I mean, you have to go to those three, to industrial 1 and 2 and heavy commercial. So it's really, at this point, I guess maybe it's sort of belt and suspenders right now. If for a dispensary, you have to already meet this, right now you have to meet those separations. And the zoning commission then, in their proposal, has peeled dispensaries out and said, if you're a dispensary, you can have less. But if you're a manufacturer, you're still at 1,000 feet. So if I'm going to put my dispensary down at my manufacturing, I have to meet the separations in that location.
Okay.
So, yeah, I don't know. We'll look at that. I'm not sure how else to, I think it's just the way we're parsing right now, the separations is probably making it more confusing, because now we've separated dispensaries from everything else.
Okay, sounds like something we should follow up
And
with.
just to comment on that, the reason that I thought about it is because if all it is a dispensary, they're not growing, they're not doing anything, I have really probably no problem with this zone map for that. But if you start adding all those other things on, then I think we have to stay at that 1,000 foot and everything else. So that's kind of why it popped up to me, is if all we're talking about is the dispensary, period, then, I don't really have a problem with this new zoning map that they've got. Just comment on that.
Okay, Councilmember Tricky and Councilmember Ronning?
Well, let me ask my question first. Would it be possible to give us a list of like the different sections and where you got them from? So that we would know that, like, I'm guessing probably 50% of this is probably from the Montana State Code.
Let me see how much detail I have on this. This slide here will tell you that what is in the back in that Article 10, those came from the Montana Department of Revenue. Okay. So all of the details where it has the marijuana labeling and the QR codes and whatnot, that came from the Department of Revenue. The appeal provisions came from the spa ordinance, in Pueblo, the postings, and then our weed mowing. So other than that, most of it will have come from 701, House Bill 701, other than these things right here.
Okay, thanks. And I think part of what I thought I heard Councilmember Boyette say is he thinks that one business still has to do all things in one location. And that's the current situation with medical marijuana, but not the going forward.
They are moving from the vertical integration to more of a horizontal. So you will probably see specialization at this point. There will be, as the one gentleman said, people who want to focus on cultivation because that's what they're good at, that's what they love. Some may want to do manufacturing, buy their marijuana from somewhere, make product from that, and then sell that product to the dispensaries to sell to the consumers. I think what you're going to see is people are going to migrate to their business talents, and you'll see a lot more horizontal integration.
Thank you, Councilmember Ronning and Councilmember Neese.
Thank you. I apologize, Chris or Karen, if you've answered this, and there's just like kind of a lot to think about here. So if I may have missed it entirely. So Chris, with the first reading on October 25th, or at least the projected that's the first reading, and the vote happens, so the vote gets counted on November 2nd. I'm assuming that there are provisions in place if the voters come back and say, yep, no adult use rec dispensaries. Do we have to redo first reading or worse? Because the first reading, the language is going to be with adult use rec cap in there. So how does that work?
what you will find is it's built into the ordinance as it is. It says if there's a referendum of the voters, then any of those provisions, that is immediately an impermissible use.
All right, thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Bernice, Councilmember Yakovich.
Thank you, Mayor. Karen, this is a similar question on the timing of the ordinance. So if we vote on this and let's say the last date is, I think, November 22nd, it goes 30 days to December 22nd. So does that mean on December 23rd, people can come down to the city and apply for licenses? Or is this ordinance effective, is there an effective date of January 1?
It's effective, Gina, am I correct, 30 days after?
Yes, the ordinance is effective 30 days after second reading.
Okay. Quick follow-up on that then. Can we stipulate an effective date of the ordinance?
Yes.
Okay, then I would recommend we make the effective date of the ordinance January 1.
Related to that, what if we made it
December 31st?
December 31st would be
December
fine, too.
31st, 2022, if we made it any time in that 18-month period that's realistic? Oh, you're saying of 2021. I'm talking about a very much later effective date.
We want to have our ordinances in place so that we can define who is and who is not in good standing as of the end of this year. So it really needs to be December 31st at the latest of this year.
December 31st at 11:59 PM or something like that?
They may be queued up at the dispensaries at that time. I'm just not sure.
Okay, think about that one, Councilmember Yakovich.
Thank you, Honor and Council, and Karen, thank you. I think sometimes maybe I can be rough or a little bit, because sometimes I lack the clarity or understanding, but I appreciate what Councilmember Joy said about your hard work, and a lot of effort and energy there that takes, as Councilmember Ronning said, it's a lot to capture. So I'm going to kind of answer some of the questions, but I have to say I am prejudiced. In my 60-plus years, I've never met a healthy, happy family smoking pot, or a happy couple, or a healthy couple smoking pot. You know, it's like, this is a serious issue for us and for me, and it is an illegal drug nationally for a reason. So here we are in 2021 deciding on a drug that's going to make everybody happy and healthy and not. So it's our struggle, but that's my prejudice, so forgive me, Council, for saying that. I'm all for the 1,000 feet. And what I'm hearing from Council Brown is you're struggling is, I think, probable, maybe, we're not sure. Well, if we're not sure, then let's set the bar high first. If and that segues into area. You know, area here could be that everybody spreads out all over the place, but there's no guarantee for that. Business people are smart. They're going to plant wherever they can get the best customers, low radar and less lighting and all that. I mean, plenty of lighting, but what I mean is an area where they will make the money. So I'm for what was that, the pink one or the green shade, but 1,000 feet. So I'm setting the bar high for the council. If we need to, next year, we can always go down. We can always go down. And I get what Councilman Chiriqui is saying. I mean, I don't want to banish one ward for another, but we have to be very careful here where we're going with this. And tier 3, I'm for tier 3 myself. Again, why raise this when we can do it over time, right? Raising the bar meaning looking at this overall, but lowering the bar at first when we're looking at these things. And finally, separation. You know, like I don't hear, and maybe I missed this point, but Bob or whatever could put all of them on the south side if they want to. And that is a big concern for me. I say none on the south side. I want to defend that area a lot because it is the red zone for low income and abating homes and all kinds of stuff going on. So maybe Mr. Friday could help me with that down the road, or Mr. Kukulski, that can it be a mile separation or 20 mile separation or something like that? Okay. Thank you. I made my point.
You don't have to answer that one. I think we kind of know the answer to that one.
Thank you, council.
Thank you. Anything else, council, before we move to our next item? Is there more? Anything else the staff wants us to wrestle with further? Okay, then I guess we'll deem item number 3 resolved for the time being and move on to item number 4. Violent Crime Reduction Partnership. Chris, our city administrator, is our presenter tonight. So Chris, item number 4, please.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. So we gave you a memo. It really summarizes where we're at and a draft resolution that ideally the council would adopt next week during it on its consent agenda, whether you choose to, well, and recognize the agenda is already out to the public. So right now it sits on consent. If you want to pull it off consent, you're free to do so. We have been working diligently with County Attorney Twito. This afternoon I had a good conversation with Sheriff Linder. Folks amongst our team have been talking to the governor's office, and so we are doing everything we can to make sure that ultimately the idea is that the state of Montana, Yellowstone County, and the city of Billings are collaborating with each other to spend one-time money, $4 million in resources, to have as positive impact as possible on dealing with, I'm just going to call it a crisis, right? We met today with our acting U.S. attorney, or tentative, whatever the proper term is. Violent crime numbers through 3/4 of this year are just shy of 1,200. So that we are squarely on pace to exceed the 2020 numbers that were double the prior year. So welcome and open to anybody in the state of Montana who's dealing with what we're dealing with, that the state would help them too, because we don't want anybody to be subject to this. So specific to Billings. So we believe we maximize, so 2 things. We believe we maximize our $1 million commitment as outlined in the memo. Major case agent to be funded by the city of Billings, a prosecutor to be funded by the city, and a victim witness specialist, all to focus on violent crimes related to domestic violence and drugs. Our collaboration goes wider than that. It really seeks to move people through the criminal justice system, but a huge chunk of that's the state's responsibility, most namely public defenders. So none of our dollars, all of us are trying to stay in our lanes, as I mentioned 2 weeks ago. We're not funding each other's programs. So if a significant chunk of the states, but they've been very careful for us to not overstate where they're going to spend their money, because we don't know that yet. This is being presented to a committee on October 27th. But if their focus, and they've said verbally, they're comfortable with us saying this, the jail is certainly a problem for all of us. And moving people through the criminal justice system so that they can get a fair trial and get a determination of their case, so they're not sitting in jail waiting, helps the system. And the state appears to be, at least the proposal from the administration will be that the state focus most of its $2 million, or a significant chunk of its $2 million, specifically in that area. So if they play their part, and the county, and the conversation with the sheriff this afternoon, if the county focuses also on the jail and working in partnership with us through the county attorney's office to deal with violent crime related to drugs and domestic violence, we believe we have something here very worthy of our $1 million leveraging $3 million from outside agencies. And candidly, the bottom line is that's what we're trying to do here. And be glad to answer questions for you. But we are still developing that. This is in the development stages, and we believe our one key to being successful on October 27th would be for the city and county to firmly kind of take a step, like adopting a resolution like is proposed next Monday, so there's clarity that we can communicate with the state as to what we're willing to do to make this happen.
Thank you very much, Chris. Questions for staff. I'll start with one simple one for Gina. There were two minor typos in the draft resolution. I don't know if these have been corrected in the version that is probably now been released to the public for meeting on Monday. Third recital, third line down, this is the one that begins, whereas these court backlogs. In the third line, it says being released pretrial or, spelled O-R-E. So sounds good if you read it, but it doesn't look so good if you don't. So maybe you could correct that if it hasn't. But
That should be corrected in the one that's attached to the packet for next week.
Okay, perfect. And then in the recital that is number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, down, beginning, considering these challenges, the state of Montana. Are you with me?
Yep.
The third line in our draft says, by dedicating up to $2 million of its ARPA funds to local agencies for the next 3 years. And they're really not dedicating anything to local agencies, so I would just recommend that we delete, if it hasn't been already, 2 local agencies.
No, they're not. No, that's a great catch, because you're exactly right, Mayor. The idea here is that we're not getting a grant, and Yellowstone County isn't getting a grant, but the state would be committing to fund its particular key components. Yellowstone County, its components, and us, our components. So we're not looking for a grant from the state to us locally.
Okay, thank you. Some other questions, Councilmember Boyette, Ronning, Brown.
Well, I have two questions. First one is, what happens in 3 years? Do we fire these people? I mean, you've already thought of that one probably, but, and the second one is, how do we monitor this to see if we're getting the bang for the bucks? After a year, if nothing's happened, can we stop it? I mean, if it's after a year, we say, well, this is really great, maybe we should continue it.
So I'll take the second one first. Yep, every year when you adopt a budget, you have the authority to reduce the size of your appropriations that you authorize if you don't see evidence that supports where the funds are being spent. And yes, at the end of 3 years, this funding commitment is for 3 years. We have also selected, and in conversation at the local level, meaning Yellowstone County and the city of Billings, is the idea that we want, ideally, we will have data to show to the state of Montana, you need to keep, don't you dare slide away $2 million, because here's the effect it's having positively on fighting crime here locally. But that's yet to be seen as to what the evidence is of success or failure or impact. I say that and I'm concerned about the difficulty of measuring this stuff, right? I mean, when the federal, I'm not getting the title right, when we had our conversation today with Mr. Johnson and he shows me what violent crime rates are through each quarter of this current fiscal year, and we're already at last year's astronomical number, do I think this is going to change the whole trajectory? I don't know that it is, but I think it absolutely can and should make a significant difference when the sheriff tells me, and the county attorney, that the jail population is significantly clogged with individuals who've not even been assigned public defenders. And so, until that process starts moving, we don't get any space in the jail for additional felons. They just have to keep triaging just how bad is it for you to get a bed in the jail.
Councilor Ronnie?
Chris, so I have two basic questions. One being, is the violent crime that Leif is, acting U.S. Attorney Leif Johnson, is the violent crime that he's defining the violent crime that is defined by the state of Montana? So it's got very specific definitions of which crimes are considered violent. Not all crimes are considered violent, and there's very specific crimes that are considered qualify for violent crimes. Are those the crimes that we're talking about specifically? And I guess I would like clarification on that, on how is it going to be defined, what crimes are related to drugs?
So to answer the first part of your question, and I'm going to ask Kevin to please help me if I don't answer this right, is I've understanding all of our discussions to be around the FBI's definition of violent crime. Homicide, rape, aggravated assaults, and armed robberies. That those really are four, I hear that repeatedly from Leif, from the sheriff, and from the chief, that those are four defined.
Could you say those one more time, please?
Aggravated assault, homicide, rape, and armed robbery. And then to get in the weeds, and now I'm really touching some dangerous territory with your background, Leif was careful to point out that when it comes to rape, that those cases change or commonly change through the process. Whether that number drops or not as to what's first identified as a rape. I got the impression from the conversation today that it may. It's not going to go higher than the numbers in the quarterly reports, but it may go down some because what is first identified as rape may, through evidence, through process, be determined not to be rape. But the point of, in answering your questions, I understand we're using FBI defined violent crime.
So what's defined at the federal level, not the state level, I guess?
That's my
So
understanding.
Okay, so that's interesting to me, that it's all state money going into this, no federal money's going into this, yet we're using federal defined crimes of violence versus state defined, and they are different.
Okay.
And so that's just interesting to me. And then the other specific, at least when related to that question, would be from Chief St. John, how he's defining major case. I would like to just personally know that information, if he could get that back to us, because I think this goes to Councilman Boyette's question on how we're going to define this. If there's not some clear crimes that we're defining right now, then how do we define that later? Do we see that those numbers went down? Because quite frankly, I went through, since January 1 of this year, I went through how many SANE exams the city of Billings has paid for. To date, we've paid for 42. And that's only the Billings Police Department identifying a rape and going to the Billings Clinic. You have all the other law enforcement jurisdictions that go as well. That is a violent crime in the state of Montana, as is human trafficking in the state of Montana. So I just would like clarification from Chief St. John on how he's defining a major case agent and what that detective would be focused on. Then the other question I have is also in relation to Councilmember Boyette. So under fiscal effects, we've got the first fiscal effect in the staff memo says that the funding for this source will come through the public safety mill levy. If that is not passed, then it's going to go to the ARPA dollars. So could you clarify that a bit more?
Yes.
Thank you.
So thank you. So first of all, yeah, we can circle back on the major case agent. And again, I want to be deliberate in not defining where the state's going, but the state has also indicated in discussion that major case agents would be part of their expenditures as well. So I'll be curious if are those definitions match up with each other for how that's defined for resources by the city. I don't know if any county are identified that way, but in the dialogue, the state has also identified as a potential area for their investment. The second component, I'm sorry, I lost it now, is, yes, the financing. So these three positions are well embedded inside the $7.1 million public safety ask. You know, I mean, honestly, as the state asks this question, or we're having this dialogue, if our voters say yes, we're putting $7.1 million over the next 2 years and then going forward into trying to solve this problem. So I've seen this as inside of that commitment that we've made to help our community deal with violent crime and crime, period. Now, if the voters say no, then I want to be clear. I don't know whether it would be ARPA or reserve, but we will come here to make a recommendation. In fact, my intent in the memo is to say we don't want to be boxed in as only ARPA dollars being eligible. We would like the flexibility, and the state has indicated they don't really care. They just want to know, is there a local commitment if they're going to make a $2 million commitment? And I think we would, yes, we would need to use our cash in order to fulfill that part of the responsibility if this comes to fruition.
Thank you. Councilmember Brown?
Thank you, Mayor. Chris, I don't mean this critical or anything, but I was kind of disappointed when I saw what we were thinking about using for our $1 million, because it is included in the mill levy. Now, if the mill levy passes, we're just saying we're already contributing 7, and we're just passing up on the million that they're asking us to combine with their 3 million. See, I guess I was expecting something more. I don't know what. I certainly don't have any ideas. But, you know, I mean, we've talked about what was it, the dry house or whatever it was. You know, we've talked about some of these other things that I think, and I don't know how they directly, you know, affect violent crime. That is not my world, thank God. But I don't know. I guess my concern is we've got this opportunity, and if the mill levy passes, we're kind of just saying, well, we're already contributing our 7, but we're already planning on doing that. That was the whole point of the mill levy to begin with, was so that we could address these violent crimes, right? That's the whole plan, is to drive that down.
Absolutely. If the council were to decide from a policy perspective, you want it to be 8.1 year one. Now, I say that loosely. Realistically, we cannot add the capacity to our system in 12 months to do $7.1 million. So I don't know how much. I think we will implement as aggressively as we can, unless the council says you only get X dollars to implement year one.
I'm talking about just the $1 million commitment they're asking for.
Correct, but from a practical standpoint, you're talking about bodies, you're talking about people. And so.
That's the only thing we're thinking that we
well,
can contribute is bodies.
Predominantly. I mean, I will tell you, outside of that, we're having conversations with both the university and the college about economic analyses on what does a homicide cost the city of Billings and Yellowstone County? What does a rape cost us? What does an aggravated assault cost us? Because the state has consistently gotten away with saying, well, incarceration costs X and we won't adjust our budget up. We want to show them, well, here's what you may be saved. Here's what we paid locally for each of these violent crimes. It's going to take us months, but we've been knocking on doors to see if we can get that kind of economic analysis. So it isn't just bodies, but to meet the $1 million commitment, this appeared to us as a staff as the most straightforward way to show we would be putting resources into these teams made up of state, county, and city to tackle these challenges.
Okay, so
Right.
So as I understand it, that the real ask then is if the public safety mill levy doesn't go, we want to bring these people on. If it does, that's our contribution.
That was the intent of what was put together. The council certainly can direct it more aggressive than that if you want to.
I'll comment on that. Because I shared the similar disappointment that we weren't committing to spend even more money on this serious problem. But I don't think the state is committed to that because we're already making, as you said, the promise if it doesn't pass. There's no guarantee it's going to pass. We're putting if it does pass, 6 times, as Chris said, more than our $1 million commitment, or $1.1 million, more than 6 times. And if we want to come back, we always can later. And I would encourage us, rather than trying to make some haphazard decision like this in the spur of the moment, that we be more deliberate about it. Because you mentioned the sobering center. I would like to see some relatively small seed money go to a rewards program that we do not have now that would team with the private sector. The red or the green light program that the eBird, maybe we could expand that. SEPTED, these other sort of relatively low cost pilot programs would be good. Those are all going to take some time to sort through time we don't have on this one right now. Councilmember Neese, though, you want to go somewhere else?
Yeah, I do want to go somewhere else, but I just want to address this real quick, Chris, because you and I have talked a little bit about this as far as the funding. I think when we look at the fiscal effects, I think the first year we're not going to even collect any taxes, even if the public safety mill levy passes. So we're going to have to, if we're going to get aggressive, we're going to have to approve some out of our ARPA funds anyway to move forward on this, I would expect. So I think that, just to be aware of that, I think if that is going to happen if you want to move aggressively. So is that correct?
It is. It's an excellent reminder. I turned in my ballot today. When you read your ballot, it correctly states this will not be collected until 2023, year 1. Fiscal year, or not fiscal year, what's the calendar year? So yes, we are going to have to front everything we do to start implementing sooner than waiting 13, 14 months from now to start going. And and we only have our reserves and ARPA as a funding source for that.
Okay, and then my questions were regarding kind of around the jail and the public safety mill levy that's kind of been brought up, but you mentioned some things during your conversations as you introduced this, that a lot of these crimes are not being prosecuted, and that's on the county level that's filling up the jails. And so we've got a jail problem we keep talking about. I mean, our police officers are doing their job, they're catching criminals, they're getting turned in, but the county's not prosecuting, the county's not doing their job yet. We have to come up with $1 million to help fix the county problem, which, from what I hear you say, that we're only going to be working on our stuff, which sounds like we may do more arrests, put more workload on the county, which can't do their job as far as getting them prosecuted now, if I understand correctly. So why are we going to put more money into a problem that, the county's not going to be able to fix anyway? I mean, unless they put in the $1 million and do it. In other words, we have to put an extra $1 million in just to kind of help the county along, is the way I'm looking at this.
So
am I reading that wrong?
I think in part. Okay. I do see all 3 of these entities are leveraging each other to do this partnership, right? Any one of us backs out, county, city, or state, I think the other ones are out. And then if what I understand is the public defender component, which is the most acute crisis in the system, now officers would add to that what they're seeing on the streets, that is squarely the state's responsibility, not Yellowstone County. Squarely the state's responsibility. So that's why, we've had questions on this on the public safety levy conversations, and those come from people who I think work in the criminal justice system. They recognize if you don't do something, if the state doesn't do something to provide public defense for these individuals, then we're not going to move anything through the system either. And that's squarely what I heard from the sheriff this afternoon, that cases need to be moved through the system to be adjudicated and determine whether they belong to the state, whether they should be released because they're not guilty or for whatever reason. And right now, that is clogging up the system and causing us the biggest harm, and relates to, I heard a number north of 50% of who's in the jail. And the number today was 534 individuals in the jail today.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Rewalt.
Thank you, Mayor. So you're saying the public defender is, lack of public defender is the state's position, right?
State's
Okay.
responsibility.
Yep, that's what I'm talking about. So I think we're letting the state off way, way, way too easy, because they're clogging up the jail on that end. They're clogging up the jail because they got state prisoners in our jail. And they're clogging up our jail and sucking all the money for our public safety by passing out free bus tickets to everybody that gets pre-released and paroled when they leave Deer Lodge to Billings, Montana. So this is all the state's responsibility when you really stop and look at it. Why don't we make them start paying for all these people they're sending here? Why don't we make them get their guys out of the jail and move them up to the Department of Corrections where they belong? It looks to me like it's a state issue, not so much a county and a city issue, and they want us to jump in and share with them? I'm thinking we're not tough enough on them. I think the state needs to come up with a lot more money than what they're coming up with, and let us do our job like we do it.
Okay, Councilor Purington.
So I think that this involves a lot of different elements. We still haven't heard what the county's going to do, what their portion is. I know what the state says they're going to do with their $2 million. We know what we're going to do with our $1 million. So what is the county going to do with their $1 million? Do we know that yet? What their plan is?
The commitment I've had in the conversations with the county attorney and the sheriff is their two hottest issues is jail population and violent crimes related to drugs and domestic violence.
But what are they going to do?
I don't have more details for you tonight, and I would ask you not to let perfect be the enemy of good. I don't disagree with anything that Councilmember Ewald said, but we could stand right here and draw a line and say we're not in for our $1 million because you've created a $20 million problem in our community. I'm pretty confident that's not going to solve, we're not going to get anywhere if that's the approach we take tonight or next week.
And I agree. I think the state has done some things. It's my understanding that they have been pulling some of their prisoners out of our jail. I don't know how much has loosened it up. But in visiting with, I didn't visit with Sheriff Linder, but another person in the sheriff's office, and a big concern is there is up to 98% of the people that are in the jail need a public defender. So the public defender thing is a big piece. The other big piece is the mental illness aspect of it, because they don't have places for them. And I'm kind of like Sean, I was kind of thinking, we're going to do something new and different, because, you know, it seems like there's so many times that we just keep throwing money at the same place, but we're not doing anything innovative or creative. And I was even thinking today, because when they're talking about jail diversion, to me, that would be county. but we've been talking about a sobering center, another crisis center or something to put these people that don't really belong in jail someplace else. I'm not a fan of sobering centers, but I thought for a 3-year period, that might be a great thing for us to, to partner with the county with, or, a nonprofit or something, and put our money there to get them out of the jail and maybe do some work in the mental illness addiction to get them out of the jail, because if they don't belong in the jail, and that's where part of that clog is as well. There's a lot of different clogs in the jail. So I'm anxious to see more detail. I think your proposition to this team, that's what the city's going to do. I think it's pretty well defined. What the state's going to do sounds pretty well defined too. But I think the one that we don't have a definition is what the county's going to do. Because we want them all to be successful.
Thank you very much, and I wouldn't necessarily disagree. I have heard the county talk about hiring more prosecutors. I would just comment that if we don't like what they come up with, and we wanted to back out of our resolution, I guess we could, but we would need to expect them to do the same in the county as well. So what the state just wants to know is, are we committed if they move ahead on October 27th?
Why is it that date?
That's the date that this legislative committee that is charged with allocating ARPA dollars for state economic recovery meets. I don't know if they're committed to making the decision. I think they've said that they will likely make the decision on that date, although we need to get more information on that. Further comment, and we should try to wrap up. Councilmember Ronning?
Thank you.
Or go to public comments, I apologize.
Yeah. So just so you know, I'm 100% in, I've said it before, but clearly I do want more definition, because I'm just going to be very, very frank, and I agree with a couple of things that were said. And if we just keep doing policing the exact same way we've been doing it, clearly we're not going to succeed, and we're not going to push this further. So my encouragement to you, Chris, is just like what I've told you before. My encouragement is going to be make sure that there's diverse people at that table to offer some different perspectives, and not just the same people at the same table making the same decisions. So my encouragement, please include a more diverse group at that decision-making table. And I absolutely agree with Frank that I do think that we need to start holding our state legislators more accountable. And I think one of the questions that would be really nice if they could perhaps take up and answer, if they're willing to start making up for the difference in what they pay the Yellowstone County Detention Facility compared to what all the rest of us pay. If they're willing to start paying more for their inmates and make up for the loss that the city of Billings has been having to pay. So the city, if my understanding is the county pays like $67, $68 for each inmate, which puts the burden on the city of Billings and the other counties to make up that $125,000 loss every year. So I would love to know if the state would consider paying more for their inmates and raise what they pay to help with that budget. But I don't, my personal opinion is I don't think the state's been really clear on what they're going to do. So I personally would like to hear more definition of what the others are going to do. I'm full in with the city's part. Want to make that clear. So thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Brown, and back to Councilmember Purington.
Yeah, I would just say I agree with a lot of Penny's first part anyway, with the diverse group and stuff like that, look at different ways. I would like to remind everybody that the state is the one that brought this up, and they're extending the olive branch. We don't want to just forget that. And we're the only group right now that they've asked. So they recognize it's a problem. They recognize it needs to be addressed. I know they could throw a whole lot more money in the pot, but, I don't want people to forget that. We've talked, I don't know how many times, about trying to get to where we're working with the county, we're working with the state, and this is a really good opportunity, especially if we're doing it the way, that Chris has brought it forward. We're only investing $1 million if the public bill safety doesn't pass, God, I hope it does, but this is a great opportunity for us to get those guys at the table with us. So please don't forget that.
I apologize. I kind of recognized Councilmember Neese first and then back to Councilmember Purington.
Oh, I'm sorry, I was going to wait for public comment, then I'll make.
Okay, all right. Councilmember Purington, before we go to public comment?
I did speak with the local legislator, and he made the comment, and I thought it was very interesting. He said when Brian Gookin was the sheriff in Bozeman, that he just said they couldn't come to the jail. I said, well, you can do that. You can tell the state that these people can't come to the jail. And he said, yeah, if they're state. But I think a lot of our prisoners, they're held on state crimes, but they're local, is kind of my understanding. And then to address that about how much we pay, the legislature has not agreed to do the capital cost of what it takes to run the jail. They're just paying for that inmate to feed them, and I suppose with personnel, whatever that takes, but they don't invest in that capital cost. And that's what some of our legislators have been trying to do, to bump that up with the state. And so far, they haven't done it. So I don't know that we can refuse some prisoners. If we could, maybe that helps. But that was just an opinion of one of the legislators, so.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's go to public comment then on this item, number 4. If anybody would like to comment, please do so. Tell us your name and address, and ask you to keep your comments to 3 minutes.
Thank you. Tim Warburton, 3444 Lucky Penny Lane. Thought I'd use this opportunity to obviously voice my support for the public safety mill levy. I think it's important. I think 1,200 violent crimes this year so far. Sad for our community. Devastating, honestly, that we've already surpassed last year's total. So I think it reiterates my frustration, I think, with the cannabis discussion that's taken up so much of your guys' time. As we've heard tonight, there's really no data out there because it hasn't been a real huge issue here in our community. And I understand that cannabis can cause problems for people. I'm an addiction counselor, I get it. Anything can be a problem for people, right? Food, sex, cannabis, all of it. Doesn't matter what it is, right? We have a violent crime problem. We have a hard drug problem here, fentanyl, opiates. All of those things need to be addressed. And the public safety mill levy needs to be supported by our community. Some of the misinformation out there is unfortunate. I've heard it from members of council, which is really disheartening. I'd also just like to say, I think it's great that we have city staff working with the city, working with the county. We've been talking about that here for a long time, so it's good to see some of those relationships coming together. So this is just another plug for the public safety mill levy. If you're out there watching, you haven't filled out your ballot yet, look through it. The city's made the case. The data's there. If you have questions, reach out. But it's important, so I would encourage you to vote yes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other public comment on this item? Any other public comment? Don't see any, so we'll close the public comment period. Back to Councilmember Neese.
Thank you, Mayor. You know, Chris, I appreciate you working with the county and city. I'm a little hard on the county sometimes because we have a lot of problems in that with the state as well. But as Councilman Brown said, I do agree. I think they brought an olive branch. I appreciate the work you're trying to get done with the county. So I would support something like this. And I know that the issues we have with when you look at this, when you looked at the stats as far as what our victims specialists and prosecutors had, it's just not sustainable. We cannot do that. So having the money spent in this area, I think, is the wise way to go. And I think whether the public safety mill levy goes or not, we need to really address that issue. Even if this group doesn't work on that, we need to address that issue. So I think it's a good idea. I'm concerned how it will impact the public safety mill levy a little bit because people think that we're throwing more money at it, and why do we have the public safety mill levy? But it is separate and different, and I think we need to make sure that that's clear, that this is not in place of the public safety mill levy.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Yakowicz.
Your Honor and Council, I'd just like to direct staff to go forward.
Second.
Motion is to move ahead, consistent with the staff recommendation, seconded by Councilmember Shaw. Discussion on the motion. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Neese.
Did I understand this was already on the agenda for next week?
It is, so I guess this is a motion not to take it off the agenda. But, you know, I take that back because we do need to communicate with the commission. I've spoken with Chris about this, before October 27th. We will vote on October 25th, but of course that group gets their packet now. So I think if we had on the record, so that Chris could communicate in writing that at this session, council voted to move ahead with this by whatever the margin is of that vote, ideally unanimously, that has some weight before the 25th, which is cutting it awfully close, and we'd like to influence their impression as soon as possible. So that's the value I would see in this motion. So, okay. Discussion on the motion. Councilmember Purington and Councilmember Ewald.
I just think it's kind of ironic with the suggestions that we have for the city. It's going to add more to the jail. You're going to be prosecuting cases. You're going to have major crimes going after these guys. They're going to be, prosecuted, go to jail. And I found it kind of ironic that that's probably what we'll be doing, which is fine with me because you're getting bad guys off the street. So I don't have a problem, but just ironic.
Councilmember Ewald.
Thank you, Mayor. So the county and the city, these will probably be ARPA dollars that get spent on this?
I think that's as probable as anything else.
Okay, so all the people who live in the city of Billings are also Yellowstone County people, so we share equally with everybody in Yellowstone County. So let's just say there's 150,000 in Yellowstone County, 120,000 in Billings. 80% of that county's donation to this pot is city of Billings, and then they want us to put in another $1 million from the city of Billings. So I don't know, I'm kind of a number guy, and that just doesn't work out in my head.
I guess the other interesting number would be to know whether 100% of that crime increase is in the city as opposed to outside. I don't know, but it's possible that we are not contributing based on our contribution to the crime problem. But again, I don't know. Those are interesting questions. Chris.
Mayor and council, and I wish I was better with my words, but I want the record. I want you guys, I want anybody listening. No, I am not claiming that what we're doing here is incredibly innovative with the way that we're attacking this problem, but it is different than we have been in the past. The public safety levy is not just putting police officers and firefighters and opening fire stations and putting more officers on the street. It is a holistic approach. It did come with a peer review set of 134 or 36 recommendations on how to be most efficient. And the state, who I could say, I guess, squarely has the responsibility of dealing with providing public defense, has got a massive backlog. According to what's been reported, I'm trusting it's accurate, more backlog than all of Missoula County's cases combined. So the fact that we are finally getting some direct commitment from the state of Montana and the sheriff and the county commissioner, talked to two of the three, to work in this collaborative way is different than we have been doing of, I think, the recent past. Still may not, it's not perfect. I'm not going to pretend it's perfect, but it is absolutely different than what we've been doing. And most commonly, we are challenged in the dozens of presentations on the public safety levy, the education sessions. What about the jail? This is a direct approach to move people through the criminal justice system, no matter how much we love it, hate it, support it, don't support it. Short of it, nothing is happening beyond what's been going on for the last many months and years. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Tricky, and we'll try to proceed to a vote.
Yeah, I think, I support moving forward with this. I think it's really, really important for people to understand that a large number of people in our jail have not been convicted of a crime yet. They are waiting to be put into the system and have their day in court. And one of the biggest reasons that that's happening is because we have underfunded the public defender's office. You know, so I'm not happy about getting money to the public defender's office this way. I have a number of political issues with it, but at the same time, it's money that we need to have happen if we want to get people out of the jail so that we can get people who are convicted of crimes into the jail. So I support it.
Thank you very much. Councilor, you're prepared to vote? Okay, we'll move, again, the motion is by Councilmember Yakovich, second by Councilmember Shaw, to continue along this path and to give permission, I guess, to Chris to communicate that to this commission before Monday night. If in favor of that motion, please say aye. Aye. If opposed, say nay. Motion passes with Councilmember Ewald voting in the negative. So I think, Chris, it'd be accurate to say the council has approved the motion by an overwhelming majority. That concludes then item number 4, brings us down to item number 5, council holiday schedule. Chris, can you explain that for us?
We'd like to take the week between Christmas and New Year's off. So consistent with what we've been doing for years or decades, that's what this proposes. Hey, we're in. Is that you do 2 regular meetings and 1 work session in the month of December so that we are done prior to December 25th, and the next meeting comes in the new year.
And Chris, what do you need? Just direction from us to continue to do that, I guess?
I guess we've very consistently done it this way. We put it on a work session agenda. I don't know if it's on consent. I think when we just have gotten the nod in the past, that's how we put the calendar together to finish out the year.
Okay,
So,
anybody want to make a nod? Councilmember Boyette?
I move that we approve or make a
Direct.
motion to approve the council holiday schedule as mentioned by the city administrator.
Okay, second. Councilmember Brown has the second.
Point of order.
Discussion or point of order, Councilmember Neese.
It was a motion to approve, and we can only make motions to direct.
Thank you. Yeah, that is corrected. Discussion on the motion. Is there any discussion on the motion? Councilmember Neese?
This does not impact the city business hours, only our council meetings. Is that correct?
That's my understanding. Yeah. Just switches council's the one and changes the work session to a business meeting.
Thank you.
Correct. Okay, any other discussion? If not, all in favor of that motion, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. That concludes the regular 5 items. Bring us to items of council discussion. Do we? Oh, you're right. Thank you very much. We will back up, and if there is any public comment, we will have that vote again if needed. Is there any public comment on item number 5? No. Public comment is closed. Council discussion. Any items of general council discussion? Councilmember Yakovich?
Thank you, Honored Council. There's a saying that no good deed goes unpunished. And I refer this to Council Member Ewald. I just wanted to quickly read a Friends of the Billings Dog Park praises him. And the reason I say this is some people misunderstood his intention. It is almost complete. Huge thanks to City Councilman Frank Ewald for donating his time and skills to install the shade structure at High Sierra Park Dog Park. This concrete was donated by Heights Task Force member Ed Arnold, and we are so grateful. The generosity of these 2 gentlemen have saved Friends of Billings Dog Park roughly $5,000, which we can use for future structures at High Sierra. So thank you, Mr. Ewald. He was driving his truck into the dog park with all of his tools and equipment, and I did confirm with Mr. Whitaker that all of this was sanctioned by the city and approved by the Parks Department. And I just want to thank Mr. Ewald for taking the initiative and really helping. And if you go to the Friends of the Dog Park, Friends of Billings Dog Park, you can see how 60 or more comments just thanking him and Ed Arnold and others for providing shade and shelter for the people there. And I'm just sorry, Mr. Ewald, that you were misunderstood doing a good deed for the community. So kudos to you.
Amen. Thank you, Councilor Biakowicz. Any other items of council discussion before we go to public comment on non-agenda items? Don't see any. So we'll now open up for public comment on non-agenda items. If anybody would like to comment on something that was not on our agenda tonight, please come to the podium. Ask that you keep your comments to 3 minutes. Tell us your name and address.
Catherine Card, 2815 4th Avenue South. I know it's been hard for you to listen to me and to read all the documents I've sent you in the last 9-10 months. It's there's been a lot. But if you want me to go away, I ask you to consider why I come to be with you week after week and month after month. I do like you, and I love to see your work. But I'm more because I live in the heart of one of the big crime spots in town. I am interested in the health of the Billings Police Department, and I'm interested in being able to support it. In this last almost year, I have come up and told you problems I have with the police department and its operations. And I want you to know that I'm not coming here because I want to be an enemy of you or Chief St. John. But I see that in your role, you can make sure that the police department is following the law, that they're honest in all their dealings, that their work has integrity. Just because you like Chief St. John, or I like Chief St. John, we can't assume that all is hunky-dory under his leadership. You and really I, like members of the community, are his safety net. When we see something, we can help him not fall into the pit, or any of the police department fall into the pit. I have come up with names, mentioned names, said names in my writings that I believe from my work these last many months are connected to a motorcycle gang. I'm not sure that you should be offended by that because I name names. Maybe just learn from it. Make sure that it's not right. Make sure I'm crazy and wrong, and ensure that personnel with the law enforcement here in Billings know that they have to live up to a standard of behavior and associations, all to in trust positions. I, as a pastor, I, as a health physicist with a high-level government clearance, have had to and still have to live up to some expectations and be careful about how I behave within the community, even though I've abused you guys. So I'm saying that what I have to say I think is important if you'll take time to read it. And hopefully it's helpful to the health of the Billings Police Department, because I really care about that. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any other public comment on something that was not on our agenda this evening? Any other public comment on non-agenda items? Do not see any, so we will close that public comment period. Councilmember Biakowicz.
I just wanted to share, if I may. Sure. Mayor and Council, I've known Chief St. John for over 20 years. I've lived on the south side, raised 5 kids on the south side, and still live there for over 30 years. Actually, he and the BP, when a teenager was shot and killed 3 houses from where I lived, responded quickly. Over the years, the BPD and Mr. St. John actually helped me, encouraged me to start the annual March Against Drugs and Violence, which attracted over 300 kids each year. And actually, he's walked with us in solidarity every year. The police force has really been a very big presence on the south side, and I just wanted to emphasize that when they come to the South Side Neighborhood Task Force, and I go to all the task forces most of the time, not all the time, but there the PD speaks for over 30 to an hour, being so gracious, giving us time to answer many of the questions. When we had Phillips 66, the PD was there honorably, with integrity and trustworthiness. In the past, on the south side, my kids and I would find drug needles and things like that. And I'd have to say that nothing is perfect, but the PD has really done an incredible job working in our neighborhood and create a positive impact for our neighborhood. And we've had drug houses that we've had addressed, and the SWAT teams move in, and always men and women of integrity and trustworthiness. And I want to also acknowledge Chief Officer Thomas Keatley, who works with the and staff and volunteers who do a yeoman's job with abandoned cars. And if you ever meet Officer Keatley, he represents Chief St. John with honesty, integrity, trustworthiness, and a big smile whenever you meet him. But these people who do work in our south side is commendable, addressing, abating abandoned cars and all kinds of things. So Chief St. John and the Billings Police Force have my total confidence of their work, being trustworthy, their integrity is high, and their awesome service to Ward 1. And I would be happy even to take a survey, but I can say with confidence, and I shared this with Councilperson Shaw, that I'm speaking for the majority of the south side, the north side, Pioneer Park, all the way heights up to the hilltop, that the men and women in blue are honorable, trustworthy, and people of great integrity. And that's because I've met with them personally. And this gentleman in the back here inspires me. He's always been an example of being on the street. He helped launch some of the first early bike patrol downtown. So for me and my family, we are very grateful, and living on the south side, very confident and safe with the leadership of Chief St. John and the BPT. So BPD. Thank you, Council, for allowing me to share that.
You bet. Thank you very much. I think, Council, then I was a council member running.
Thank you. I would also like to share something as well. So if you know my history, I don't like corrupt government, and I'll sue it. And I'll spend 5 years of my life suing a corrupt government, even if it's law enforcement. I don't take corrupt government lightly, and so I will go after corrupt government. I have no hesitation with that. Both Councilwoman Denise Joy and I were very hard on Chief St. John when there was an earlier time when there were several police officers that were not identified, but a civilian female was identified, and we were very hard and very confrontational with Chief St. John on that. And he respected our confrontation and talked with us on that and listened to us. So I don't have a problem with that at all, and I will confront that. But like Councilman Yakowicz, I have reviewed the material. I've taken it seriously. I've met with city administration and Assistant City Administrator Kukulski. I've spoken with Chief St. John. I've had conversations with our police department, and I am 100% in agreement with Councilman Yakowicz that I have such incredible faith in our police department. I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that every single police officer will stand up to those that don't have integrity within the police department faster than I will. That they'll stand up against those that they deem to not have the integrity that should be held with that badge faster than I will. They hold each other accountable. I would also like to share a personal experience with Chief St. John that the public doesn't know, and we've kept this private. But as council members know, earlier this year, I was threatened by an individual with mental illness. And he did personally come after me from a distance and sent me very threatening voicemail messages, text messages, and we discovered the relationship as to why he was directing his attacks at me. And Chief St. John personally went and met with his family. I personally went and met with his family. But the family told me that Chief St. John acted with such extraordinary compassion in how he dealt with them with the mental illness that their son was battling. And they're the ones who shared with me, because I wasn't in the meeting with Chief St. John with that family. The family shared with me the extraordinary compassion that he met with them and related with them. And they shared with me just how much that impacted them, knowing that this was the chief of police, that this is who was representing our community. And I really want people to know that that is the chief we've got. That is the leadership that we have. And I certainly respect him. He's got my full respect, as does the entirety of the Billings Police Department. So I have taken everything seriously. And if there's something I see that wouldn't be of integrity that this city represents, I have no hesitation calling it out, but I just haven't seen it. I've seen just the opposite. So thank you for this time.
Thank you. I'm sorry?
I'm going to have to say something.
Okay, Councilmember Trinky.
I have no personal problem with the police department, the Billings Police Department. I have no personal problem with Chief St. John. I have said publicly a number of times that I think he is doing a fantastic job with the resources that we are giving him. But let me ask you this. If we have this much confidence in the police department and their integrity, why did we just create a commission to sit there and advise the police department? That seems to be a contradiction. If you look back at the national data that we got along with the CPSM report, I was surprised personally to see that 85% of the population approved of what the police department was doing. I was also really surprised when the CPSM people said that that was not a good number. To me, the biggest problems are transparency in the system and also the way that it is currently set up. We are structurally set up, and the police department can't do anything about it right now. They are policing themselves. So how can people in the community who have a problem with the police department have any confidence in a system that is policing itself? Okay, yes. Listen to what Ms. Card is saying. She's not necessarily saying that anybody is necessarily doing something bad, but she is saying that her experience tells her that there are some problems that we need to think about and look at. And frankly, I hear this from a whole bunch of other people here in the city, especially people who are at the lower end of the status and economic situation here. You know, so yeah, okay, we are not happy to hear this every meeting, but you know what? I cannot sit here and say that I'm not going to join the chorus and say, Ms. Card, please stop. Thank you for doing what you're doing. It's never easy to be the person that stands up and says, hey, you know, you got a problem here, you need to look at it. We do have a problem here, and we are looking at it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm about to adjourn this meeting.
Please.
Please. Okay. Thank you very much for your comments. We are adjourned.